Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Naruto was born before Second Shinobi War Part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for Part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. Since it seems to be some kind of rite of passage to write a Naruto fanfic, here is my attempt at it. Namely, this is a Naruto time travel FIC with Naruto as the time traveler, in which he ends up in a time before the start of the Second Shinobi World War. The story will be similar to Die Another Day by Neon Zangetsu, in my opinion, a time travel FIC with an interesting premise and course of the story. Other interesting time travel fics in this fandom include Rewritten by Jasticus and Lest You Fade Here All Alone by Silik. There are other good ones, but those three I may chose stand out for one reason or another. Then there is Whirlpool Chronicles by Keij, which also takes place during the Second Shinobi World War, and has some semblance to this story, mostly owed to the fact that we occasionally bounce ideas off each other. First of all, you really should check out my profile page. There are certain things in the Naruto setting I greatly dislike, and in a sense, my collected thoughts on a lot of those things can be found there. I wouldn't want you to go into this with false expectations of what awaits you. You have returned from taking the time to look at my profile page. Good, there are a few things I have got to mention that are relevant to this story. This Naruto doesn't exactly come from the canon timeline. Many events played out the same, but there were differences. The most important one, Naruto is the holder of a bloodline unique to him, the result of a carefully planned breeding program conducted by an unknown group of people existing for ages, who manipulated events throughout the centuries to get their desired result. Specific men and females to have offspring with each other. Their goal was to recreate the power wielded by the progenitor of the shinobi world Kagaya, and by mixing certain bloodlines with each other they thought this could be done. They were successful with Naruto, something they never knew before they died thinking, Naruto another failure. The reason for this is mostly owed to the expression of his bloodline. Which is, let's go with saying different. In essence, it can be summed up as, he is able to copy bloodlines by assimilating DNA to accommodate them. There is a limit to how many of those he can hold at any given time, making him from a genetic standpoint the ultimate DNA donor, strengthening what is already there. This bloodline won't play a big role for quite some time, and won't be the main focus of this story. So yes, this will be a godlike Naruto story. The pairing will eventually be Naruto Uzumaki, Mikoto Uchiha, Mei Terumi, Tsunade Senju, Kushina Uzumaki, Akiko Hyuga, Hinata's mom. Another word of warning, this isn't the main project I'm working on. There are some unpublished works my focus is on, so at a certain point, after I burn through my backlog, updates will be sparse. This story will be cross-posted on Fanfiction Online. This chapter was edited by Illuminated. Chapter 01, Arrival. October 3rd, year 36 AFOK. I slowly stood up from my crouched position in the middle of a huge crater. My clothes were smoking from the heat, the means of my travel exposed them to, and the water I had soaked them in was barely enough to prevent them from burning up. I would have no doubt shared their fate without the assortment of jutsu at my disposal. Well, I am confident it wouldn't have been enough to kill me. Not much is capable of that nowadays, especially since I got a handle on my bloodline. Still, recovering from third-degree burns across your whole body is anything but fun. The pain from suffering those injuries and then from healing from them was something I could do without. I gave my surroundings a short glance and was able to ascertain that yes, I arrived where I planned to. Seeing healthy trees alone was a strong indication I had succeeded. It had been years since I came across healthy plant life, and the damage done to this forest was by my hands. I couldn't suppress my elation at that, and a smirk sneaked on my features. This was a rarity nowadays. Considering that where, or rather when I was coming from, there weren't many appropriate occasions for displaying such an emotion. But now that I have arrived, I can prevent it all from happening. Hey partner, we succeeded. We have another chance, and this time we won't waste it. We will protect your siblings together, I thought. But instead of a grumpy response of how he could see that for himself, I was met with silence. No, this couldn't be, I worried. Without wasting any time, I retreated to the sanctum of my mind, and what I found there was the confirmation of my worst fears. The clearing of the huge forest we designed together was empty. All trace of Kurama was gone. I couldn't even sense any hint of residual chakra. He was just gone. I dropped to my knees. I couldn't shake the feeling he knew exactly what would await him when we attempted this journey. I recalled how he tried to disperse my fears of what toll using his chakra in the sealing array would have on him. How he distracted me from the problem, always insisting that as the strongest of the Biju, there was nothing that could hurt him, least of all a seal designed by me, his dumb human partner. Damn it, Kurama, damn it, didn't we promise each other we would save the world together or die trying? How could you just abandon me and leave me hanging like this? Deep down, I knew this was unfair, as his sacrifice was what allowed me to come here. Still, he could have told me. I know we could have found another way. My eyes started to moisten. Another friend was lost forever. I was surprised that I was still capable of crying, given how many times I shed tears standing at the grave of another dear friend. One would think the human body could ever hope to produce so many of them. I wiped away my tears with the crook of my arm, and silently I vowed that these will be the last tears I shed for a dead friend, ever again. I wanted to make sure of that, but I didn't have the best track record of keeping promises at this point. The only promise I seemed to always be able to fulfill, no matter how much I rushed headfirst into a fight, was to come back. I always came back. And every time I did, it was with the corpse of another of my friends carried within a storage seal to be burned, to prevent our enemies from desecrating them. I balled my hands into fists. Not this time, I promised myself. This time, all of my enemies would have to weep for their friends and their families if they dared to stand in my way. I expanded my senses more than dozens of kilometers in every direction and was hit with the presence of countless people living within my range. My focus immediately turned to the small village housing several 10,000 people. There was no doubt this was home. Given those numbers, I was at a time when it was still strong, perhaps stronger than I remembered it ever being. Good, and as if to validate my thoughts, I sensed 5 full squads of shinobi, who had been dispatched and were nearing my current location at a fast pace. This meant that it was time to make myself scarce. I was far enough away that I didn't need to fear already being in the focus of Konoha's all-seeing eyes, but that wouldn't be the case for long. With no time to dally, I set a foot forward only to lose my balance. I was able to right myself just in time to prevent myself from planting my face into the dirt. Damn. I took stock of my body and realized that my chakra coils had barely avoided being shredded by the ordeal that got me here, and it was a condition the rest of my body shared. It felt sore all over. I was exhausted, my reserves nearly spent, and by losing Kurama my chakra control was ruined. I was probably back at the level I had around the time I learned the Rasengan. Whoa, I really hope this was just a temporary setback. I wouldn't want to spend months with an army of clones doing nothing other than increasingly more difficult chakra exercises to get it back to a level where I could use Irijutsu and Genjutsu again. I would hate for all the time invested it took me to get it to a level that had allowed Sakura to beat her knowledge and jutsu into my head to have been wasted. Well, that was a problem for another time. At least the seals adorning my body were still there and functioning. Even with a Byakugan wielder part of those squads, it wouldn't be an easy task to find me. Since one of my seals blurs the energy running through my body in such a way that they have to look hard to be able to see me. I wouldn't look like a beacon of light in the darkest of nights for them like a shinobi with such vast reserves like myself normally would. Instead, they would see me faded, barely standing out against the background. Despite my best efforts to attain the absolute pinnacle of concealing seals, the Byakugan still had it beat. That just shows how fearsome it is, and its reputation as the all-seeing eyes was more than just deserved. The best I could hope for, if I had the misfortune to cross paths with one of them, was for the Byakugan user to be inexperienced. To not be a stickler for detail, those were the only ones who could be fooled with my little work of art. Of course, I didn't intend to let it come to that. An experienced average wielder of the dojutsu has a range of around 20 kilometers. Consequently, I just had to stay out of this range and circle around them to avoid detection. Well, I also had to hope for there to be none of those Hyuga prodigies like Niji with them, because, in that instance, 20 kilometers wouldn't cut it. By carefully moving my body, I was able to prevent a repeat stumbling over my own feet. After taking a few steps in which no further problem befell me, I slowly started to increase my speed, moving away from the point of my arrival. It took me a good portion of the day to circle and evade them, as there was not only the standard Konoha searching pattern employed by those sent to check the phenomenon that accompanied my arrival, but also the numerous ranging patrols close to the village. Aside from the Byakugan, there wasn't much I had to fear in the detection department. You couldn't be taught by one of Konoha's foremost tracking specialists without picking up the trade, especially how to avoid detection yourself. My scent was easier to mask than chakra circulating in one's body. With the extensive use of seals, neither the Inuzuka nor the Aburame could track me. When I finally neared the 20 kilometers perimeter around Konoha, I partly deactivated my suppression seals to give myself the presence of an average jonin. My attire helped, being a long, black, hooded coat that extended to my ankles, and as the Rokudame, I was carrying an enormous amount of ANBU animal mask with me. There was no shortage of death in the latter days of our resistance, especially in the ranks of Konoha's finest. So for every mask I handed out, I had received 5 back, taken from the dead bodies of their previous owners. It had gone so far that being nominated for ANBU and bestowed with a mask was no longer seen as an honor, an award, to count yourselves among the elite for having become a shadow protector of Konoha, but was rather seen as a curse that only allowed for one outcome, death, the question being, how long until it was carried out? I hated it, every part of it. My younger self couldn't hope to fathom what it would mean to be Hokage even at the best of times, let alone during a war in which humanity fought against extinction. I chose to wear the fox mask. It was fitting, for more than just one reason. Historically, it was the mask given to the only ANBU operative who was always said to be working alone, the hunter, the metaphorical fox in the henhouse. At this point, I had no clue exactly what year I returned to, sensing the third Hokage didn't help as he was the longest reigning Hokage of Konoha, having held office for more than 40 years, only interrupted by the short reign of my father. What I could be sure of was the fact that I must be in a time before the Kyuubi attack. It was the only thing that would explain the high population. Furthermore, I could sense all of the Sannin within the village. Their chakra presences were mature, but still quite a ways off from their primes. This narrowed it down some, but it still wasn't as precise as I wished it to be before I would set foot in the village. Since there was no helping it, I approached the village over the last 5 kilometers via an ANBU return corridor. It was used for long-term absentees who might not be in the know regarding current security protocols and approach vectors, and as far as I knew dates back to the time of the first Hokage and has never changed since then. To be honest, this was a great security risk to be so careless with something like this. The only reason I could think of for it to have never been changed in all this time had its origin in ANBU splintered off in Danzo's route, and he made extensive use of this corridor. Because the third never intended for them to have a fallout over his machinations, he closed his eyes to it. Well, I couldn't complain about it now since I was now profiting from it. But inwardly I wondered if such sloppiness in this instance, and other areas, stemming from the existence of Root, was what ultimately allowed Orochimaru to infiltrate Konoha and bring his troops into a position around the village, or if he was actively supported from the inside. This was a question that had never been answered to my full satisfaction even after I received the hat and possessed all the clearances to read the classified documents of the highest order. I had no intention to allow the events to play out the same this time. If I even get a whiff of Orochimaru thinking about defecting or conducting any twisted experiments, I would put him 6 feet under myself. And I was going to make sure that there was no way for him to return to the land of the living. I reached a small cave, a good kilometer away from the outer village walls, that marked the entrance to the tunnel system leading right into the village. It was protected by a security seal that could only be trespassed by someone wearing a Konoha ANBU tattoo or by a seal master. Meaning that a real seal master, not one of those quacks calling themselves seal masters who had trouble sealing a biju with a pre-drawn seal and instructions. The seals in front of me had withstood the test of time and were still used to Konoha's second destruction. They had been crafted by no one less than Mito Uzumaki herself, the one and only Grand Mistress of Seals who ever set foot into Konoha. From what I was told, my mother never lived long enough to achieve Mito's prowess, but she had been well on her way to reaching the same heights. I expanded the seal written at the cave entrance to look at it, and it was once more made clear that Mito was the real deal. If I didn't already know this particular seal by heart, even I would have needed some time just to crack her seal encryption. To be fair, she didn't really make an effort here, and she had the right of it. This seal was nothing special. It was just a short stopgap meant to dissuade all but the most determined from going any further. The real protection measure was of a different nature, like the invisible sensing barrier she crafted for Konoha. It was a true piece of art, and if Konoha used it as it was intended, to notice and intercept any and all who disturbed the barrier, no exception like the approach corridor, then I would have made the acquaintance of an ANBU squad by now. Complacency, after all, is death to a shinobi. With a trained eye, I found the relevant line and added a small disruption seal between the detection properties and the ones activating the alarms. By doing this, the seal would still detect my presence but wouldn't be able to trigger the countermeasures. My small addition was timed to only be active for the time it would take me to reach the village proper, after which it would dissolve as if it was never there, to begin with. With my modifications done, I entered the tunnels and followed them to the end. The whole time, I was dreading that someone decided to enter the tunnels while I was traversing them. The chances of it happening were slim, nevertheless existent. I wasn't keen on meeting the Hokage and having to explain to him why I saw it necessary to take out his shinobi. Convincing him about myself would be hard enough without such an accident occurring. I was in luck and reached the exit unmolested. The tunnel led to the basement of a well-frequented shop that mostly sold food. Since it was a huge shop full of shelves that turned the ground level into a real maze, nobody would notice someone slip inside the store from underground and leave it, even though said person never entered the shop from the street in the first place. I removed my mask, put down my hood, and slipped into the store unseen. At the moment, there was no shinobi present within, so I didn't bother to buy something to reinforce my cover as just another customer, and simply left. As I stepped out on the street, my first gaze fell onto the Hokage monument, the 3 faces carved in stone. It was a nostalgic sight even though I had never seen it with only 3 faces, and I had to admit I had never seen my face right next to Tsunade either. By the time I was made Hokage, the mountain had been reduced to rubble for quite some time, and we had better things to do than cut someone's face in stone. I enjoyed the atmosphere wandering through the streets. The people were happy. There was no despondency, deep-seated fear, or mourning present in the faces of the people. I couldn't put it in words how I missed this: the children running circles around the people in the crowd trying to catch each other, the half-hearted reprimand when they ran into someone. I really enjoyed just allowing myself to float in a crowd of people not worn down by war and its effects, seeing people who still haven't lost hope and just continued to fight on because they knew nothing else. This was why I returned, why Kurama sacrificed himself, and I will damn well make sure it wasn't in vain. I wouldn't waste my second chance to protect this way of life. My determination strengthened further as I walked at an unhurried pace to the center with its tower overtopping all the other buildings. I was contemplating resting up for a time until I faced the Hokage, but with my insurance in the form of a Hirishin tag in place, far outside the village, I saw no need to postpone it. If the conversation should turn sour, there was nothing that could prevent me from just leaving. Even at my worst, they wouldn't be able to subdue me. Even with help from the likes of the professor, the village would have to pay a steep price for only attempting to do so. When I entered the building, none of the gazes that lingered onto me for any meaningful amounts of time escaped my notice, nor did the stiffening of the more experienced shinobi in my presence, who no doubt recognized the subtle tells that clearly spoke of my proficiency in the art of taking someone's life. The lack of a Konoha headband on my person did the rest. I had made the conscious decision not to wear one. Neither did I want to be approached by shinobi inquiring about not knowing me, nor did I want to make my affiliation public before I got the concession I would need to fulfill my goal. After all, for a long time by now, my fealty was not only to Konoha, and I wouldn't want to give away the only real advantage I had in my free agent status to the Hokage by wearing anything tying me to Konoha. If I couldn't get him to fear that I might take what I know elsewhere, he would hold all the cards, well, most of them. The third Hokage needed a few years of retirement, and a constant reminder of his failures from looking at my face, the spitting image of his successor, to mellow out to the Gigi I knew during my childhood. Accordingly, the Sarutobi Hiruzen of this time would be another person entirely. The faster I acknowledged that fact, the less it would hurt to confront him. I neared the Chunin Man mission desk, and sitting in front of me was a man, who was the spitting image of a younger Irika, sans the scars. His cheekbones, hair, everything was the same. There was no doubt in my mind that this must be his father. Naturally, I was shocked. I expected to run into some people I knew in my time, or their close relatives and parents, but I never would have thought to meet him. I winced when my mind drifted to the last moments of my first teacher, and had to suppress that particular gruesome memory. "Is everything all right?" he asked, concerned. "Yeah, sorry," I said. "I was just somewhere else with my thoughts." "What did you say? Could you repeat it?" "I asked how might Konoha be able to help you." "I'm not here to hire Konoha shinobi," I clarified. "I'm here to offer vital information and my services to the village." He was speechless at my answer and was struggling to formulate a proper response. "This isn't something that we can help you with," he finally managed to get out. "I'm very much aware, which is why I'd greatly appreciate it if you could escort me to meet the Hokage. He, after all, is qualified to make such decisions," I pointed out. There was some hesitation, but ultimately he decided to humor me. Since it was above his pay grade, it was better for someone else to take care of it. He escorted me out of the room and up the stairs directly to the Hokage's office, one of the greatest shinobi of his time. The Hokage's secretary, a young, good-looking, auburn-haired woman no doubt as a civilian disguised ANBU operative going by her chakra, greeted him. "Yumino-san, shouldn't you be at the mission desk?" "This man," he explained as he pointed behind himself at me, "claims to have vital information and wants to offer it to Konoha." "I see," she said while she scrutinized me with the gaze and experience of a seasoned shinobi. "Allow me to announce you, Mr. Naruto," was my curt answer. She stood up from her chair and after softly knocking at the large double door, slipped past the barely opening doors. We waited a lot longer than just announcing someone's presence should have taken. My best guess was that she was a censor and more than likely an expert in gathering clues through body language. I wondered what she was able to glean from me. My musings were interrupted when the doors opened again, and the woman said with a fake smile, "The Hokage is awaiting you." I turned to Irika's father. "Thank you, Yumino-san," I said to him and gave her a curt nod before I walked towards the still open doors, passing the secretary who remained standing next to the door frame eyeing me warily the whole way. After I fully entered the room, she closed the double doors behind me. It was nostalgic, standing here, in front of the imposing desk with the Hokage sitting behind it. I could clearly remember the times I was summoned, after I pulled one of my pranks, to be reprimanded for it, during all of which Gigi, most of the time, was fighting an internal battle to keep up his stoic expression and not given to smirking at my antics. A short roam of my eyes across the room confirmed that nothing changed in all this time he held office. The room stayed virtually the same. No additional effects were added from now to the time I first entered this room as a child in the arms of the man now scrutinizing me. However, the same couldn't be said about him. He was decades younger than I was used to, lacking the wrinkles of old age and the physical traces of a long and hard life. He was at the very peak of his prime and radiated strength with every pore of his being. Not many could hope to compare with him, the man I admired throughout my whole childhood, and it was a new experience to be looked at by the man with anything else than love and poorly hidden regret. I met his eyes, and the staring contest began. More than once, I had been at the receiving end of such a look, trying to weigh my worth, to measure me, trying to uncover my inner self. Most thought me wanting, well, until the moment I educated them differently. After all, I wasn't the duped Konoha most surprising ninja for nothing. I ended our proverbial dick measuring contest by simply smiling at him. I could see how it left him flustered. Good, I needed him to take me seriously. I strode forward, my every step measured and exuding confidence, and I sensed the ANBU hidden throughout the room readying themselves to intervene because they had finally started to perceive me as what I was, a potential threat to the life of their Kage. Not that they could do anything about me if I was serious about killing him, but they didn't know that. I stopped my march a few steps away from his desk. "We have to talk, Hokage-sama." "Do we?" He shot back, leaning back ever so slightly in his chair, playing up his fake mindlessness underneath. "Things were different, I wonder about that, but humor me, would you? When I decided to come here, I didn't expect this to be easy, but this is way beyond the most difficult scenario I imagine." I was about to retort to get him to give up his overly guarded stance when the doors to his office opened and inside stepped none other than the first Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi, Uzumaki Mito. I had no need to turn my head to know it was her. Even in her old age, her presence had an overwhelming strength dwarfing anyone else's in the village aside from my own. Even if I couldn't identify her by this alone, the faint presence of Karama coming off from her would allow me to know exactly who she was. No matter how good she was able to conceal his chakra within her seal, I would always be able to sense him, and I had to say she did a really good job at that. I doubted there were more than a handful of sensors in the elemental nations who could spot her being a Jinchuriki, and this was an optimistic estimate, another attestation to her skill. What I really didn't expect to see was how her presence rattled Sarutobi. The previously displayed confidence was replaced with uncertainty, and his authority with subserviency. I was baffled until I remembered that this was the wife of the first Hokage, and if she was anything like my mother, she would have made sure to get the pupils of her husband and his brother to submit to her authority one way or the other. He stood up to show her the respect she was due. "Mito-sama, what can I do for you?" I was on my daily stroll when the most unusual thing happened. I sensed the presence of Uzumaki arriving on the outskirts of the village. It was faint, hidden, and disguised, but undoubtedly the real deal. So you might be able to imagine my surprise when this presence entered the village through a secret entrance, and made his way here. This piqued my curiosity because I did not expect another messenger or delegation of Yuzushiogakure to arrive during my lifetime. Well, so much for trying to hide my ancestry, but this might work out in my favor. However, seeing the narrowed eyes of the Hokage dissuaded me from that notion. He rounded the table and fetched one of the few chairs placed alongside the wall, to put it alongside his own behind the desk, and offered it up for Mito to sit upon. Without a word, as if expecting it, she made her way to the chair. Because I chose not to show my back to Hiruzen, it took her stepping into my field of view to get my first glance at her from the corner of my eyes. She wore a milk-white high-collared kimono with a purple obi around her waist, with her long, bright red hair arranged in buns held together by hairpins and hair clips. She was old, far older than she had any right to be as an Uzumaki. She should have only reached the midpoint or less of her life when she transferred the Kyuubi to my mother at the age of 64, and since she was here, alive, she had to be younger. Was it the Kyuubi's presence taking a toll on her life force? After all, she became a Jinchuriki as an adult. As a result, her body didn't have sufficient time to adapt to it. This is why only children no older than 12 are used as Biju containers. The earlier they become a Jinchuriki, the better to guarantee the stability of the seal and the survival of the host. But if that was the case and Kurama had detrimental effects on her, no non-adult Uzumaki would have ever had a chance to survive it at all. It was, therefore, no wonder they only ever dared to use Uzumaki, and then only those with the strongest and densest chakra to contain the mightiest of the Biju. Walking ever so slightly hunched over, relying upon a cane to walk, she reached her destination. Only then it struck me what it was that felt out of place as I watched the scene. Her cane made no sound whenever it touched the ground. "Thank you, Sara-chan." Speaking those words, she took place on the chair and rested her cane on her lap. She used the time it took the third to return to his seat to look at me with a smile on her lips. I nodded my head at her and silently had my lips form the words Uzumaki-sama. When the Hokage once more sat in his chair, he asked, "So where were we, Uzumaki Naruto?" I entertained the idea of objecting to the last name he decided to bestow upon me but decided against it, and my silence served to confirm Mito's assumption. "I was about to tell you why I'm here, but before we continue, could you please take the necessary precautions to ensure my words will only be heard by you two?" I requested. I could see how the Hokage was about to deny my request when a raised hand of Mito was enough to still his intended protest. "Of course, Naruto-san." She used the cane held in her right hand to touch the ground right next to her feet with its tip, and a black half-translucent liquid-like mass started to emerge from the point of contact. Within a few seconds, it spread in a circular fashion on the floor around us three, flowing unimpeded below even my feet. The propagation came to a stop with only us three standing on top of it. The edges of the liquid then began to form walls that rose up to the ceiling, and then propagated towards the center right above its point of origin. Hence we ended up inside a cylindrically shaped barrier, allowing us on the inside free, slightly distorted sight of the outside. "Impressive," I couldn't help myself from commenting. "Please, no false humility. If any of those seals I can sense on your body originates from your brush, I might be able to learn a thing or two from you," she complimented. The narrowing of the Hokage's eyes at her statement made it clear he had to reevaluate me. Inwardly I grinned, getting the confirmation that I could even surprise the current holder of the moniker God of Shinobi. "You flatter me, Uzumaki-sama," my humble self replied. "Would one of you please be so kind tell me what day it is?" "Today is the 3rd of October," she said. "Which year?" I asked. That question got both of them to raise their eyebrows. "It has been 36 years since the founding of Konoha," the Hokage answered. "Good. It was not ideal. I would have wished for a little more time to prepare myself and the village for the events to come, but I knew better than anyone beggars can't be choosers. Then I'm not too late." "Late for what?" "You better start to make sense soon and stop wasting our time," the Hokage barked. "To make the Second Shinobi World War a short one, with Konoha as the ultimate winner," I simply stated. "War? What are you talking about? The elemental nations never were so peaceful. The last border dispute was years ago. Our alliances are steady. There is no shortage of anything vital. There is absolutely nothing that would indicate we are facing another war," the Hokage lectured incredulously. "Nevertheless you are," I said. "Am I right to assume Kushina is already in the village?" "That's classified information," the Hokage retorted. An amused Mito remarked, "Please, as if you would not already know the answer to that question." Touché. It would be exceedingly hard to get anything past her considering her proficiency in reading emotions. However, there were a few secrets I had to keep even from them. Then, the events leading to the start of the Second Shinobi World War are already in motion. "If this really is true, how do you know all this, and why don't you stop it?" Sarutobi inquired. "Because I can't. There are forces at work who want for the war to happen. If I were to stop this attempt of theirs, the next one or the one after that would succeed. But at the moment, we're in the prime position to be aware it is coming, and if we play our cards right, we can capitalize on it and cripple the manipulated attacking nations for decades to come, giving us time to take out the real threat," I explained. "Why would anybody want a war? What is their objective?" Mito wondered. "This time, the complete annihilation of the Uzumaki clan," I told her. "That can't be." She slipped in her formal speech in her outrage. "Why would anybody attack us? My kin are peaceful people, not engaging in any conflicts for years. Most of our shinobi and civilians alike never left the island," she lamented. "Simple, they grew too powerful. Their very existence makes the use of their strongest weapons a risky gamble on the best of days. In addition, the bloodlines that can be attained, and the accumulated knowledge, make it a too enticing target for some to ignore. Of course, robbing Konoha, The winner of the First World War, of a loyal ally, is just the icing on the cake, I said. An angered Hokage demanded, "Stop this farce, now! As if you could make us believe anybody could overcome Yuzushiogakura's defenses. I've been there. The island is an unassailable fortress, their defenses impregnable. No army could hope to overcome that and not be crushed with their soldiers' blood coloring the whirlpools surrounding the island in red. Are they truly impregnable? You especially should know there is no such thing as impossible in the world we live in. So what if you can't hope to overcome them from the outside? What about from within? As we're speaking, the enemy has already infiltrated Yuzushiogakure and is sabotaging the defensive seals of the village." I gave them a moment to process that statement before I continued. In a little over a month, during the full moon of November 23rd, a combined force of Mizu and Kyumo will penetrate Yuzushiogakura's barriers. Outgunned 10 to 1, their leader, either wanting to see all the clan's knowledge in the wrong hands nor his kin captured and bred for their bloodlines, will take drastic measures and attempts to summon the Shinigami himself. A gasp escaped Mito at that point in my narrative. The Yuzushiogakure forces will be sent to buy him the required time, with the 7 swordsmen leading the charge at the invading troops. The invaders will pay dearly for their audacity, but their numbers, with the elite of the Kyumo and Kiri in the vanguard under the command of the second Reikage, just couldn't be stopped. Their eventual death won't be in vain. The Shinigami called forth in a ritual that took the lives of all those summoning him, upon seeing his chosen clan being brought to the brink of extinction. He accepted the spilled blood of the Uzumaki as payment to exact bloody vengeance on their attackers. An unbelieving scoff escaped the Hokage. A glance of Mito's was enough to silence whatever retort might have been on his tongue, allowing me to proceed uninterrupted. This resulted in the majority of the invading forces, those who made landfall, being killed, and the island was cursed to kill every instance of life on it until the day the Uzumaki would one day return. The few survivors, armed with the 7 swords they took from Yuza's fiercest defenders, will meet up with the remaining Kyumo and Kiri forces, who gathered in hot water country right at the borders of fire country to invade it. Mito blanched at my recollection of events I read in a history book about the downfall of Yuzushiogakure. What about Konoha? A worried Mito sitting tensely in the front of her seat stammered. By the time Konoha will be informed of the attack, it will already have been in progress, and the fall of Yuzu was deemed inevitable. Therefore Konoha decided to send a fast-formed relief contingent to reinforce its borders. The history books will later note that there were no Uzumaki survivors. Only the handful who were away from the island at that time survived it, I dryly informed them. That is preposterous. Konoha would never abandon an ally, Sarutobi scoffed. Not even after being told by a trusted source that there's nothing to be done. After all, with Kushina already in the village, the Uzumaki had nothing else of value left to offer, isn't that right, Hokage? And a Jinchuriki with split loyalties is a dangerous thing for any village to have. Better to take out the competition and ensure unquestionable allegiance, I noted accusatorily. The barely contained anger boiled over in my counterpart. A balled fist lashed out at my last insinuation, and a mighty blow descended upon the desk, separating us from each other and destroying it. With a speed most jonin wouldn't have been able to follow. He was on me, a kunai drawn, moving in a straight line right for my throat. The weapon never reached me, held back by chains conjured up from the sitting Mito, stopping the third in his tracks. Enough, Saruchan, Mito ordered. This was just a test. He did not mean what he said. The chain loosened its grip on his body and slowly withdrew back into Mito. I bowed my head. I'm sorry, Sarutobi Dano, but I had to be sure you weren't part of this conspiracy that will lead to the downfall of Yuzu. Conspiracy? All I've heard are baseless accusations and the prediction of a made-up future, which has no basis in reality. If it should have escaped your notice, I'm the Hokage, and all the shinobi of this village only answer to me, and I gave no such order to sabotage Yuzushio nor to aid anybody in attempting it. Are you absolutely sure about that? I probed. Every shinobi in the village only answers to you? Are you suggesting I don't know what's happening in my own village, that someone is working behind my back? I'm not suggesting anything. No? Then let's stop playing games. You've something to say, then say it. Stop mincing words. I really was contemplating doing exactly that, but I knew it would get me nowhere. On the contrary, given how this conversation has gone thus far, I'd be lucky if he doesn't warn Danzo about this. Should I name him as the one conspiring with Kiri and Kumo? No, this wasn't going to work. Gigi was still friends with Danzo. I had to present irrevocable proof. Nothing short of that will get him to believe me. I'd like to do nothing more, but I know the current you wouldn't believe a word I say, which is why I'll refrain from doing so. To be honest, in your position, I wouldn't believe me either. The only thing I can ask for is for you to keep an open mind and at least prepare for the eventuality that I'm right. You've over a month to get your shinobi in their peak condition, so I'd suggest you schedule training exercises. Should I be wrong, you lose nothing. But if I'm right, this might give you the edge in the upcoming war. Surely that can't be too much to ask. If you are right, training exercises alone will not be enough to save Yuzushigakure, and do not think I did not notice you evaded answering the question of how you know about all of this, Mito stated. Where I'm from, this knowledge is ancient history. Mito's eyes widened as she started connecting the dots. It was no wonder, in order to become a seal master, you needed a vivid imagination. I was born as Uzumaki Naruto on October 10th, in the year 50th after Konoha's founding, and come from the year 68. That's impossible, the Hokage remarked dismissively. Wait, if all you said is true and you are born as an Uzumaki with the clan gone, who are your parents? She barely asked the question when she connected another dot. It is Kushi-chan. It has to be. She is your mother. With a nod, I confirmed her suspicion. I'm her firstborn son and was the third Jinchuriki of the nine-tailed demon fox. That cannot be. She closed her eyes in meditation and spent a good minute in that position only to suddenly open them wide in surprise, only to utter the word, impossible. The third gave her a curious look, and only then she started to elaborate. It is faint, barely noticeable in the process of dissipating, but there is no doubt this man was at one point the Jinchuriki of the Ninetails, and throughout this whole conversation, he did not lie once. He omitted things, but never lied. You can't believe this made-up story about time travel, Hiruzen growled, doubt clearly written all over his face. Oh, but I do, she calmly announced. Tell me, young man, you were not just a simple jonin, and you certainly did not risk coming here just to prevent the extinction of a family you never even met, since you were born more than a decade from now. Has someone ever accused you of being far too smart for your own good? She smirked at me. Once or twice for sure. There must be a story behind it. I'd rather not talk about it at this point. My story is unbelievable as it is. I wouldn't want to needlessly pile on top of it. Fair enough, but you still did not tell us why you sought us out. Surely there were better methods to get us to act in accordance with your goals? The seal mistress questioned. Circulating rumors and warning Yuzushigakure directly are just who I came up with on the spot. Despite your young appearance, you do not strike me as somebody who would leave things to chance, therefore I am reasonably sure you did not come here with no plan and contingencies in mind. While true, it isn't that easy. The method I used to get here was a one-time deal, and I couldn't be sure how far back in time I'd get sent. Arriving before the attack on Yuzushigakure takes place was just one of many possibilities. The further in the past I'd have arrived, the more secondary objectives there would have been to fulfill. This situation is not ideal, but far from the worst case. I will make it work either way. She contemplated my words for a moment, without a doubt trying to put the pieces from my cryptic responses together in order to get the whole picture. But that is not all, is it? There is something you need, something only Konoha can provide you with, and I do not think it is the means to end this war faster. Definitely not armies, those you could have gotten from every major village, nor tools. A seal master of your caliber can create anything you might need yourself given time, so what is it? What do you really need to fulfill your quest? She wondered aloud with her head tilted. After all, you cannot make me believe it is about a simple war. You are not here for something trivial like that. You are trying to prevent something far worse, and to do that you need. The QB, I said. That's not gonna happen, Sarutobi shouted, not being able to avoid noticing Mito not agreeing with his decision. You can't seriously consider that. Why not? She asked. He freely offers to become a Jinchuriki to carry that burden. And make no mistake, it is one. I was one of the few lucky ones since barely anybody is aware of my status, but that does not mean that I am blind, Saruchan. I read the reports. I know how Jinchuriki are treated. And you cannot be as naive to think the population of Konoha would be any different. Fear would be the driving force, and humans that fear, especially if they can fall back on a group that no longer requires them to think for themselves, are known to do the most stupid things. I can't be sure, he mumbled demurely. But it will never come to that, he said, convinced. We agreed to keep her status a secret as we did with yours. Yes, you did. But how often does reality bend to someone's wishes? There is always the possibility of the secret coming out, and it increases with the difficulty of the mission Kushina has to undertake. A weapon that gets never used is worthless and only starts to rust in its sheath. She paused with a sigh, and her voice softened as she continued. You, despite your best efforts, won't be able to protect her from this forever. If the situation becomes dire enough, and it will, if Naruto is to be believed, she will be deployed, forced to use her power, we both know that, and not even the Hokage will then be able to do anything about it. He is, after all, the one who has to protect the whole village, not just one citizen. It comes down to the numbers game every Hokage is familiar with: sacrifice one and in exchange save hundreds or thousands even. That is what your job is all about. Making the hard decision for the good of the whole village, she lectured. So why should I not entertain the possibility if it presents itself? To spare little Kushi-chan such a fate when there is a strong, capable, and most of all compatible shinobi standing right in front of us who wants to bear this burden? She questioned Sarutobi. There is just one thing I need to know, I need to be sure of, she continued. So excuse my straightforwardness. She focused on me with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. Are you loyal to Konoha, to the will of fire? Yes, I have been my whole life and will be to the end of my days. Konoha is my home, the place my parents sacrificed their lives to protect, the place my friends died protecting, as will I asserted. Good, she declared. Let us get you something to eat, you must be starving. She raised herself from the chair when the Sandaime interjected. You can't, he got no further, stopped by Mito's sharp retort. What? Make that decision by myself. Did you forget who it is you are speaking to? Her voice took a dangerous tone. It is my prerogative to choose my successor, and the only concession I have to grant is that he or she is a loyal Konoha shinobi. Well, as far as I am concerned, that stipulation also includes future Konoha shinobi. So on what grounds are you interfering, Saru-chan? She eased up on the stare Sarutobi was exposed to when it became clear that there would be no reply, and continued in a non-threatening manner. You should be grateful to this young man for what he already did for this village, and will no doubt continue to do so, if you allow him to. It would not set a great example for the rank and file if two people who both wore the hat would squabble about insignificant stuff, like some children. My mind came to a complete stop. How did she figure that one out? What a scary old woman. Admittedly, I didn't expect anything less from Tsunade's grandmother. Bachan's fierceness had to come from somewhere. I wasn't the only one at a loss for words. By the time the Sandaime had processed the information, Mito was already standing in front of me. Her elbow raised, prompting me to take it. She then ended the discussion, bursting her barrier around us, forcing the Sandaime to swallow whatever words he had on the tip of his tongue. She turned around one last time, addressing the Hokage. Can you or Konoha afford not to heed his warnings? Take your time and think about it, Saru-chan. I finally hooked my arm with hers, and escorted her out from the Hokage's office. While we stepped through the door, Mito said, You have got to meet Kushi-chan. She is such a whirlwind. October 3rd, year 36 AFOK. When we exited the Hokage Tower, Mito addressed me, breaking the silence that was prevalent during our descent from it. Don't worry. He will come around, eventually, Mito tried to assure me. That's not what I was saying when my stomach growled quite loudly. I paused in a moment of stupor, and then Mito started to giggle into the wrist of her kimono sleeve. She then leaned into me and whispered in my ear, You really are your mother's child. Out loud, she said, Let us go fetch Kushi-chan from the academy at the snail's pace I am restricted to nowadays. We will be just in time for it to end, and we can go eat something, together. How does ramen sound? How did she know? I inwardly wondered. She just shook her head at my involuntary reaction. Uzumaki, so easy. Contrary to her earlier complaint, I found she was easily able to match the average speed of the people walking in the streets, and I really came to enjoy the atmosphere the people around us gave off. The easygoing and happy attitude that was prevalent took care of getting me to relax a little, and for once I regretted having lost my emphatic ability along with Kurama. It would do wonders for my mental health to feel other than despair, hate, and anger from the people in my surroundings. It wasn't my heritage that drew you to investigate me, right? I ventured. Out of the corner of her eye, I could see her grimace. No, it was not your heritage, she answered in confirmation of my suspicion. That's why you called me young in appearance back in the Hokage office. Because by any other metric, I was anything but. The extensive use of shadow clones had me already accumulate the experience of several lifetimes. This power is an incredible burden, especially with not being able to stop yourself from experiencing it, she mused. I can only imagine what it must feel like to touch upon the last emotions of somebody who you are about to kill, to feel their anger, despair, hate that you know for certain is directed at you. I listed, to continue her thought. She just nodded along. It's something you get used to, something you can blank out. If you had to kill them, then one way or another, they deserve their fate. This is what I tell myself, at least. After all, I see myself as a good person. So if they didn't deserve it, I wouldn't have killed them. It's as simple as that. I chuckled self-consciously. I'm probably just lying to myself, I mused. I mean, who thinks of himself as the bad guy? Even the most despicable persons I killed didn't see themselves as the villain. They somehow found ways to justify their crimes. It had to be done. If not me, then someone else, or for science, those were just the most prominent excuses I came across, and I'm sure somewhere along the line, I've justified killing someone using the same excuse. She used us walking arm in arm to give me a reassuring squeeze and took my hand in hers. At first, when you notice doing it, you call yourself out on it. Force yourself to be better, to uphold the code. Once you're past a certain point, you just stop caring. It's a slippery slope, one I doubt someone in our profession can ultimately escape, but you might be able to stretch the time until you succumb to it, I ruminated. The lucky ones end up dead themselves before it can become an issue. However, it's an undeniable truth no one can escape from. By killing people, you're slowly killing yourself bit by bit. But that's something we've to learn to accept in this profession. My regrets about the empathic ability began to surface. The worst part of it all, what you never can shake off, is feeling the disappointment from your friends when you were just a tick too late to save their lives. It's never a prominent feeling. It's overshadowed by the regret at dying, by the love they feel for people close to them when they remember the good times they shared with them, just before their eyes close for the last time. Except, lingering under all that beneath the surface, you can feel it, the silent accusation that it was your fault. An involuntary shudder at remembering the feeling ran throughout my body and made me pause for an instant. In response, Mito just squeezed a little tighter, telling me that I wasn't alone. It mocks you, your weakness at allowing it to happen, you're unwillingly confronted with your worthlessness, that your best just wasn't good enough. Sensing it once you can manage to endure to suppress it, but the problem is that it starts to pile on. The next time you sense this particular feeling when a friend you grew up with is bleeding out in your arms, you're hit with the memory of every single instance you came across this particular feeling at the same time. It starts as a splash of water, then turns into a raging tsunami trying to crush you under its weight and drag you down into an inescapable abyss. Listening to me, she suddenly just stopped and pulled me into a hug. I didn't know how long we stood there embracing each other, but when she released me from her arms, I had tears in my eyes. I felt like the weight of the world I was carrying on my shoulders just got lighter by several orders of magnitude. Thank you, I didn't know how much I needed that, I admitted. There was a lot left unspoken. Especially the fact that going through those emotions I essentially forced them onto her with no way out. Standing this close to me and in direct contact even, she must have experienced them with the same strength as if they were her own. Anytime, my boy. Pretty pathetic, huh, from the boy who set out to save us all to have a mental breakdown in the middle of the street, I lamented. Quite to the contrary, I have yet to meet someone with a stronger mind, and anybody else, I can assure you, would have shattered into 1,000 pieces with just a tiny fraction of what you had to contend with. Do not waver in your belief in yourself, Mito declared. If you think you can no longer trust your judgment, trust mine, for I am believing in you, Uzumaki Naruto, to do the right thing, to do those things that are necessary without crossing the line. You don't. No, you know what you are talking about. Please, I was not always as ancient as I am now, and there were numerous battles I followed my dumb husband into, and you of all should know with the curse that we shared, how easy it is to get to know someone better than oneself by utilizing it. I swallowed hard at her rightful reprimand. I'm sorry. Don't be. One of the self-imposed tasks of us fossils is teaching the young ones how to behave. She hooked her arm with mine again, and we resumed our walk. I could hear her complaining under her breath, if it would be just as easy with everyone. We reached the gates of the academy shortly after. The school must have just ended because most of the young pregen and hopefuls were standing around in the courtyard, either greeting their parent who came to fetch them or huddled together in groups animatedly talking to each other. There were a few exceptions, with some of the children already leaving the premises on their way home. Some of those walking alone had a longing in their eyes when they saw one of the other kids in the embrace of their parents. These most likely were orphans. I could sympathize with them. No kid should grow up without their parents. Unfortunately, it was one of the bitter realities of the shinobi world that, at some point, you run into someone better and die for it. Still, from what I could remember from the first few years of my life, living in an orphanage, those children deserved better than what little they got, especially if their parents gave their lives in the service of Konoha. Knowing that Danzo had recruited most of his shinobi from there when he couldn't blackmail a clan to give up one of their own made me wonder if the bad living conditions they suffered might have been by design. To allow him to pressure the children and caretakers alike to accept his generosity. After I have taken him out this time around, I will have to look into that. Perhaps I could get my hand on funds to alleviate the worst of what they had to endure. My eyes had no problem making out the only redhead in the crowd of humans scurrying around, not that I would have needed them to find her. Sensing the energies her body produced, the chakra at her disposal, the quantity, and especially the quality was something else. It was as expected of a Uzumaki slated to become a Jinchuriki. She, on the other hand, had problems locating us due to her short stature. It was no surprise, with her being half a head shorter than most of the children in her vicinity. The adults mixed within the crowd only exacerbated the problem, so that even while standing on her toes, she had trouble looking past them. What immediately stood out to me as I watched her despite standing in the middle of a crowd was that she looked lost and alone. No other child took an interest in her. At most, they avoided her. Kushina wore a sleeveless yellow kimono-style blouse held closed by a green obi over a mesh shirt with a pair of dark blue shorts. Her hair was like I remembered it, Uzumaki red, long enough to reach her waist with two shoulder-length strands framing both sides of her face with a black clip in it that parted it to the left. Mito lifted her cane in the air and signaled Kushina. The next time Kushina's searching eyes fell upon the general area we waited in, her eyes widened at recognizing Mito. And without missing a beat, she ran through the crowd dancing around all the people degraded to mere obstacles in her way, only to crash at full speed into the waiting arms of a crouching Mito. Careful, young lady. One of these days, your exuberant enthusiasm will be the death of me, Mito grouched to the little whirlwind while they separated from each other. Nope, said a smiling Kushina while popping the pea. Not gonna happen, I won't allow you to Oba-san, you're gonna live forever. I would like to share in your belief, but that is not how life works. But enough of such gloomy thoughts. There's someone I would like you to meet. With a soft touch on her shoulder, she turned Kushina my way. This is Naruto. He is an Uzumaki just like us. She grimaced, turned to Mito, and asked, Are you going senile, Oba-san? There's no way he is an Uzumaki with that piss-blonde hair. Before the surprised Mito had any time to respond, her head was already facing my way again. You better apologize for tricking my Oba-san and then crawl back into the hole you came from and hope we never meet again. Or I'm gonna punch the living shit out of you, Whiskers, she threatened, and I could swear her hair started lifting itself up in the air in a menacing manner. Inwardly, I was amused by how she tried to defend her family. Outwardly, I feigned a fearful gulp. If she was anything like my younger self, laughing at her while she threatened me would sour any and all future interactions I might have with her. After all, we Uzumaki are known to hold a grudge. In addition, I really saw no need to worsen the first impression she might have gotten of me by mocking her. She seemed to have scarcely any positive interperson relationships as it was. The expression she wore amidst the crowd was of someone who desperately needed a friend above all else. I would know I was greeted by the same face for many years when I looked into a mirror. Mito placed a hand on Kushina's shoulder to forestall her charging and attacking me. Kushi-chan, calm down. What did I tell you about attacking strangers for no reason? Not to, she more asked than actually stated. But this guy can't be an Uzumaki. He has blonde hair, she adamantly argued. While you are right, the typical Uzumaki indeed has red hair, Mito conceded and inspired a smug look on Kushina's face at being affirmed in her statement not all necessarily possess it. There are cases where one parent of a child did not have red hair, resulting in one of their children not having it either. It is a rare occurrence. Nonetheless possible. Just take your Aunt Tsunade, for example. She is my granddaughter but also does not share the color of my hair, and neither did her mother. It didn't seem to have fully convinced her, because she narrowed her eyes at me, which I interpreted as a silent message. I accept it, for now, but I'm watching you. I sighed and reminisced about the numerous times I have been told by people that I was difficult as a kid. Preposterous. Seeing Kushina's expression, Mito couldn't hold in her amusement and hid her giggle behind her hand only to suggest, let us go. You can resolve your differences over something to eat. Ramen? Kushina hopefully asked. Only if you promise to be nice to Naruto. He came all this way to visit his Uzumaki-kin living in Konoha and does not deserve to be treated this way. Since he will be living with us from today onwards, you better start to get along with each other. The Uzumaki matriarch warned. That revelation had Kushina speechless. Mito then bent down and whispered into Kushina's ears. If you show yourself on your best behavior, he might even stick around, and you might be able to persuade him to become your Oniai-san. This was by no means enough to prevent somebody, with senses as sharp as mine, from hearing every word. Not a moment later, Mito's teasing had a visible effect on Kushina as her cheeks went deep red. Combined with her round chubby face and the red hair, I could understand why she was duped. Tomato in the academy. So? Mito asked Kushina with a raised eyebrow. Yes, I promise. She agreed reluctantly. Good, my little whirlpool, she said while ruffling her hair. Let us go. We walked a few dozen meters and left the crowd behind us, with Kushina practically dragging Mito behind her to reach the ramen stall faster. Where did you get those scratches on your cheek? I asked. She released Mito's hand from her grip and mumbled, "Don't want to talk about it." She turned away from us and increased her pace, and thereby distance between us in the process. I tried to say something, but seeing Mito shaking her head dissuaded me from that notion. Kushina kept walking a few steps ahead of us for the rest of the way. Her earlier good mood vanished without a trace. Her subdued behavior only changed when the Ichiraku ramen bar came into view. I shared her enthusiasm and barely managed to stop myself from running there myself, as it had been far too long since I last tasted the food of the gods prepared by one of his chosen. When we came closer, with Kushina already sitting on a stool, my eyes confirmed that yes, it was Tucci, an incredible young Tucci, but a Tucci nonetheless. He was only a few years older than me if I had to guess. For a single moment, I wondered where Ayam was before my mind caught up with me, and I had to remind myself that she wasn't even born yet. Mito and I reached the stools at the exact moment. Tucci placed the first bowl of steaming hot ramen in front of the Kushina. If there was ever any doubt about Kushina being my mother, seeing her making the ramen disappear in moments would have cleared those with absolute finality for anyone who has ever seen me eat ramen. I seated myself on a stool on Kushina's left, and Mito took place to her right. "Mito-sama, it's always a pleasure, especially if you bring my best customer along." "The usual?" Tucci greeted her with barely contained enthusiasm. "Yes, please, one bowl of miso ramen." "Coming right up," he said to her, before turning to me. "What can I bring you, esteemed customer?" "Naruto, my name is Naruto," I told him. "Naruto," then he affirmed. I took a moment to study the menu. For the most part, to satisfy my curiosity about whether it changed over the years or not. It didn't, so that left me with a taste test to see if Tucci was able to refine his art over the years. Let's start off with bowls of miso, vegetable, and pork ramen. There was a hard-to-overlook glint in his eyes. "I see, another ramen lover," he stated and started to prepare my order. "If you continue to bring such customers to my doorstep, I will be able to buy you out in no time, Mito-sama," he joked. "Too true, Tucci-san, perhaps I should set them both on a ramen-free diet," she responded, smirking. The last word wasn't even out of her mouth when Kushina attempted to argue against it. Instead, she inhaled the noodles in her mouth and had a coughing fit. This naturally wasn't nearly enough to prevent her from glaring at Mito while she was trying not to suffocate. On more than one occasion, she wasted the breath she managed to get into her lungs with great difficulty berating Mito, which only resulted in another coughing fit immediately after. While I shared her sentiment, I really thought she should evaluate her priorities. But who am I kidding? Bleeding out wouldn't have stopped my younger self from doing exactly the same. "You okay?" I asked her after she finally recovered. "Yeah," she said with tear-filled eyes, and she was about to add something, but stopped herself and allowed a smirk to show on her face that vanished as fast as it appeared, replaced by puppy dog eyes. "Nero and I-san, you've to help Yorimoto-chan. You can't allow Mito-san to take away my ramen. I need my ramen. It's the only food possessing the necessary nutrients to power a growing Uzumaki kunoichi. Please, you've to help me. There's no way I can survive on rice, nor is it able to bring out the true Uzumaki greatness." She really seemed desperate, and I was always weak to crying girls, even when I should have known better than to allow them to sucker me into making promises. "Sure, I'm on your side. I won't allow your Oba-san to withhold your ramen. And Uzumaki should never be separated from the food of the gods, after all." The words barely left my mouth when I was suddenly tackled by her, which nearly resulted in us falling from our stools, with her arms entwined around my midsection. She declared, "You're the best, Oni-chan." I lifted my head from looking at the redhead's face buried in my chest to look at a smiling Mito, who silently mouthed, "Too easy." For a moment, I contemplated being angry at her for manipulating us, especially Kushina, in such a way, but thought better of it given she helped me gain her acceptance. I mouthed my thanks in response. It took Tucci placing Kushina's second bowl on the counter to get her to release me. The bowls for Mito and myself followed not a second later. I took some chopsticks and savored the scent, the texture, the taste of my first bite. Oh my god, was it good to be home. I miss you, Ichiraku ramen. In the blink of an eye, I emptied it to the last drop. As I placed the bowl back on the counter after drinking the broth, a wide-eyed Kushina was staring at me, so I gave her a questioning look. "You're fast, but no one can eat ramen faster than me," she proudly declared. "Care to put your money where your mouth is?" I challenged. She smirked, hit the counter with her open hand, and exclaimed, "Keep it coming, to Tucci-san, someone has to be put in his place." At the other end, Mito shook her head smirking, oh my. Tucci relentlessly presented us with bowl after bowl. It took 10 servings until Kushina finally admitted defeat. I had to admit she came close. After finishing the 11th bowl. I felt sated myself. With some effort I could have managed one more at most. It seemed like years without ramen reduced the number of bowls I could eat in one sitting. It was a shortcoming I would have to overcome to get back to my old level in order to avoid being beaten by a squirt. Mito paid for us. Thank you, that's too generous, Tucci said as he bowed to her. I wish you a good day, Tucci. Mito rose from the stool and was about to walk away, when she noticed Kushina slumped down on her stool, her head placed on the counter, groaning and looking sick. Come on, Kushi-chan, time to go. I can't. My tummy hurts, and moving hurts even more, Kushina whined. That's what you get for challenging the best, I quipped. Next time I will beat you, she declared, only to shrink back on herself with pain-contorted face holding her tummy again. In your dreams, perhaps you might, out here, in reality, no way, not in 100 years, I scoffed. Well, in that case, you leave us with no other choice than to leave you behind, Mito remarked. That might teach you to eat with deliberation and not to stuff yourself beyond the point that you can walk, young lady. Please, can't you just carry me? She begged. Kushi-chan, I am an old woman. I am lucky I can manage to reach my destination on foot without having to rely on others. How do you think I could manage to carry you? Mito stressed, and in the case you have not noticed, it has been quite some time since you were a baby. For a few seconds they just stared at each other in a battle of wills, until Mito relented with a sigh and said, Perhaps your Oni-chan might be willing to carry you. Kushina shyly looked away, refraining from commenting. Instead of waiting for her to come to a decision, I walked up to her stool and knelt right next to her. Come on, Kushina-chan. I'm gonna carry you home, I offered. Don't wanna, she protested. Well, it's either that or having to stay here waiting for the food in your tummy to be digested. Your call, I said. Reluctantly she wrapped her arms around my shoulder and allowed me to give her a piggyback ride. Mito, watching this closely, couldn't contain her mirth. Even Tucci had trouble keeping his amusement to himself. This got both of them a glare from Kushina, who, to her displeasure, found that she was unable to get them to stop. To not get on her bad side, too, I started walking. If I remembered right from the old plans of Konoha that predated the Kyuubi attack, the Uzumaki compound was located next to the Senju compound, and since Mito didn't see it necessary to correct my direction, I probably was right in my assumption. The trek back to the compound was a silent affair, with Kushina sulking on my back. The only stir she made was when she saw academy kids in our vicinity. Her grip got tighter, her legs around my hip contracted, and she more than once attempted to look away to hide her face or bury her head in my neck. Something wrong, Kushina-chan? We can take a break if you're uncomfortable. I wondered about her peculiar behavior. No, everything's just fine, she hissed. Is it? Then why are you gripping me harder at irregular intervals? You aren't in pain or something, right? I asked. If so, I can take a look at you. Don't. Keep walking, she ordered. Okay, I relented. She finds it embarrassing to be seen by kids from the academy while getting a piggyback ride, Mito explained. Oh, I faked understanding. There's no reason to be embarrassed about that. On the contrary, think of it as a service provided to you. Nowadays, only princesses and children below a certain age get to enjoy being carried around. I'm no princess, she hissed. Well, are you sure about that? I asked. If I'm not mistaken, your father was the son of Yuzushiogakyo's leader, a position comparable to a daimyo, which makes you a princess. You know what, I think I'm gonna call you that from now on. I'm no damn princess, I'm gonna be a kunoichi, the best there is, and then I'm gonna become Hokage, she animatedly declared. Hokage, you set your goals high. I like it, and I'm sure you will be able to fulfill your dream just fine. You really think so? You aren't making fun of me? She doubted my words. No, of course not. I'd never dare lie to a beautiful girl like you, I remarked. Unhand me now, she suddenly raged while at the same time she was trying to wiggle her feet free. Surprised at her reaction, I set her down. What's wrong? Did I say something wrong? I asked, baffled, my eyes darting between Mito and the nearly crying Kushina as I kneeled on the ground. You jackass, she bellowed. Don't think I don't know when I'm being made fun of. What are you talking about? I meant every word I said, I stated. Liar! She screamed and charged me. Her first right punch was easily avoided by moving first my head, then my body out of the way. Because of her miss, she stumbled and momentarily lost her balance, and interrupted what she intended as a flurry of blows raining down on me until she regained her balance. Her second attack consisted of a right cross aimed at my chin, which in my kneeling position was exactly at the correct height for her to reach without overextending herself. Given her stance, it was clear she intended to follow it up with another punch. Still confused about what I did wrong that prompted such an attack and concerned about her exerting herself like that when she couldn't walk a few moments ago, I decided to end this fast. I leaned forward directly into her, which resulted in her punch sailing through the air behind my head. I then embraced her tight to my torso and stood up so that her feet left the ground, hanging uselessly in the air. My left hand was wound around her torso under her shoulders and my right hand around her thighs to take away her ability to kick me somewhere no man wants to be kicked. Kushina struggled to the best of her abilities. But without any real leverage, she was unable to put any strength in her attacks. They hailed down on me, delivered via small fist, onto my back. Her onslaught continued for far longer than it should have taken her to notice its futility. During all of this, I tried to soothe her somehow, which only yielded results when her anger slowly subsided. With every punch she threw, she turned from an angry, all-devouring maelstrom into a sobbing mess. "You're just like all the others. Making fun of me. I'm not beautiful, everybody says so, I'm just a tomato." I knew she was bullied. She had told me herself back in my time, but I never thought it was that bad. She seemed so strong, and the way she described it, how she pummeled everybody who called her that, I just somehow assumed she was above it. But I should have recognized nobody attacks someone else for no reason over things they don't care about. I should have noticed the bravado in it, how she tried to hide the hurt, remembering it must have caused her. Never again, now that I was here, nobody was going to hurt her again. I would make sure of it. I'd never make fun of you, and who says you're not beautiful? They clearly don't know what they are talking about. How could there be anyone who doesn't find your crimson red hair beautiful, who isn't enticed by your laugh, or drawn to your willfulness? Stumped by my truthful response, her cheeks reddened, and she tried to wipe off her tears. "You're not lying to me, Oniai-chan. You truly think my hair is beautiful?" she asked with tear-filled eyes. "Yes, and so are you. Don't let anybody tell you differently. They are just jealous that they don't have such nice and beautiful hair like you." The words barely left my mouth when all the air left my lungs because of how hard she hugged me. "You're the best, Oniai-chan." "Not for much longer if you continue to strangle me," I pressed out. She loosened her grip with a tint of embarrassment at her enthusiasm. "And of course I'm the best. I need to be in order to be called Oniai-chan by the future Hokage, don't I, Haim?" I said playfully. Her response only consisted of a true. She then snuggled into me. A cursory glance at my surroundings had me notice that all the people around us stopped what they were doing to watch us. Some were blatantly staring, while others were more subtly. Nonetheless, to my trained eyes, it was clear what they were doing. In any event, I didn't expect to be the talk of the village quite this fast. It wasn't that I counted on my anonymity to last, just that in case it did, some of the things would have been easier. I just hoped that there wouldn't be any fallout from this for Kushina. Her academy life seemed hard enough already. Otherwise, I might be forced to have some serious conversations with a few of her teachers that might involve some threats to their continued well-being. Mito, on the other hand, was standing there with a huge grin plastered on her face. "You did not tell me you were a heartbreaker," she smugly stated. I nearly fell over my own feet at that comment and dreadfully realized what I had just done. Didn't Mom tell me she fell in love with Dad when he complimented her hair, and when I did the same, she said I was the second person to do that, and she loved both of them? Shit, did I just change the events in such a fashion that they might never get together? I decided to ignore this possibility for now, if only for my mental well-being. "Something wrong?" she asked, amused. "You look like you have seen a ghost." "Please don't mention ghosts around me," I told her. "Oh, is there someone frightened of such things?" she said knowingly at my grimaced face. "Do not worry, I approve." I couldn't help but glare daggers at the back of Mito. She walked another few meters, feigning not to notice me falling back. "Come, let us get your Haim into a bed," she teased, and I didn't get flustered at her insinuation. Nope, not at all. I was even preparing myself to be on the receiving end of Kushina's anger, but a short glance showed that she was sleeping like a newborn in my arms. The food, physical, and mostly emotional outbursts must have been enough to exhaust her to such a degree that she was out like a light the moment she could snuggle onto something. Mito was right on one thing: Kushina had to be placed in a bed, which is why I continued to follow her and tried my best to ignore her giggling. I didn't want to know what scheme she was cooking up in her mind. I just hoped it didn't involve me in some fashion. It took us another few minutes to leave the developed center of the village until we reached the surrounding forest, still well within the outer walls. We stopped at a small stone gate embedded into a stone wall that extended for quite a stretch left and right of it. The occasional Uzumaki spiral carved into the stone left no doubt of this being the Uzumaki compound. It was great to finally get to see it with my own eyes. Since the Kyuubi rampage destroyed it entirely, and with no adult Uzumaki remaining in the village, no one had seen a need to restore it to its former glory. I couldn't fault them for it. There were other more pressing matters to attend to in the aftermath of the attack. Still, I always regretted only being able to see what it looked like from the few pictures that Tsunade still had lying around. Mito turned to me and requested, "Give me your hand." I put out my hand, careful not to wake Kushina, and with a practiced motion, Mito removed a saban needle from her hair and pecked my index finger. "Iyue," I exclaimed. "You baby," she taunted. "Wait here a moment." She then laid her hand on the handle of the gate, and it opened for her. Immediately after she stepped through, the gate closed right behind her. I could make an educated guess, for what she needed my blood, which is why I allowed her the extraction in the first place. After witnessing Haydn and his particular set of skills, I had become rather paranoid about my bodily fluids. In other words, I went to great lengths drawing more than one seal on my body capable of rendering anything leaving its confines inert unless I consciously choose otherwise. It was a necessary precaution, after all. Haydn was an idiot. The possibilities his ability opened up for an assassin were unbelievable, killing someone half the world away by only getting a hand on some of their blood. He could have killed half of Konoha in an afternoon if someone had provided him with the blood samples stored in the hospital, and instead, he used it to torture people standing in front of him for his twisted god. Mito returned a short time later. "You are now allowed to enter the confines of the compound," she said. I thanked her, and she escorted me along a narrow paved path through a small forest, which cleared out after a few hundred meters on a small hill with an unobstructed view of an enormous villa in the center of an immense garden. I could identify every kind of vegetable, fruit, and herb imaginable growing in it. There even was a small section designated for flowers. It was a truly magnificent view, like a piece of paradise. The villa wasn't any less noteworthy. It was a 3-story building built entirely out of stone, consisting of several wings surrounded by a wall. Behind the house, I could make out a small lake and couldn't keep myself from being impressed. This was idyllic, peaceful even. It sure was a stark contrast to the small flat I called home and spent the majority of my life in. Mito led me to the front entrance and opened the door for us. She took off her shoes and placed them in the allocated space. She then proceeded to do the same for the still sleeping Kushina held in my arms. I followed her example and followed her on the tatami mat floor. "Kushina's room is on the 2nd floor, the room to your right after ascending the stairs," she said, and I nodded to her in understanding. "When you have laid her down, come back downstairs so I can show you your room." The little bit I saw from the inside of the villa turned out to be even more amazing than the already great exterior would let one assume. This house was a dream come true. Kushina's room not so much, it had more resemblance to a nightmare. Having opened her room with my elbows, I thought of myself standing in the middle of a war zone. Scrolls scrawled on paper, dishes, and clothes were spread throughout the entire room. I was confident my 6-year-old messy self was tidier than her, probably. I skirted around the things lying on the floor, which was not too dissimilar to evading traps, and finally reached her big futon. With my left hand I folded back her blanket, slowly put Kushina down, and tucked her in. "Sleep tight," I whispered. I turned around and was about to leave when I noticed my foot got tangled up in something. I lifted my foot and removed the offending piece of fabric from it. I was about to place it back on the ground when my mind caught up with my eyes and identified it as a female undergarment. Instantly I threw it away and left the room behind, as fast as possible, while my mind went places. Outside I rested, leaning on her door to get myself back under control. This wasn't what I expected to come across. When the shock receded, I deemed it safe to venture downstairs. I knew my reaction wouldn't have escaped Mito, who seemed to be a sensor on par with myself, but sensing and seeing something is an entirely different matter. I wanted to preserve a little bit of my dignity, and not lose it all on the first day. I found Mito sitting at a shibudai, with a steaming teapot standing in the middle of it. A steaming cup was in front of her, and one more was on the opposite side of the table. The shibudai was placed next to a large translucent wall, allowing for an excellent view outside, showcasing the beauty of the lake and the vast backyard of the house. Clearly, responsible for this had to be the work of the seals painted on the bottom panel of each section of the wall. I wondered if the wall was translucent from the outside or if it only allowed for a one-way view. Seeing Mito was silently waiting for me to sit down, I reined in my curiosity, walked to the shukaching and seated myself. "Tea?" she inquired. "Yes, please," I answered. She took the teapot and filled my cup with a hot, aromatic green liquid. I didn't particularly like tea. Despite that, I came across a huge variety of it because those I surrounded myself with enjoyed it a great deal. Despite all my experience with it, I couldn't place this one. It smelled different than any other tea I had come across so far. It is my own blend, made from leaves only found on Yuzushiogakure, she answered my unasked question. I took the cup and took a sip, mostly out of politeness. Unexpectedly, I liked how it tasted. To make sure I wasn't just imagining things, I took another larger sip. It only confirmed my initial impression that yes, this stuff was good. It seems you like it. I never acquired the taste for the tea the mainlanders serve. It tastes too bland with a bitter undertone. I was astounded by her comment. Those were precisely the words I used in the past to explain why I didn't like to drink tea. As nice as it is to drink tea with you. Even more, now that you managed to convert me to drinking tea. Trust me, you, by far, weren't the first one that tried. I'm sure it isn't the reason why we're here, I noted accusingly. No, it is not. Why are you truly here? She asked. I was afraid you'd ask me that. Can we not talk about it? She gently shook her head at my pleading inquiry. I took a deep breath. Yeah, didn't think it would be that easy to avoid answering that particular question. Instead of answering her, I unsealed the last headband I wore from one of the scrolls I had fastened on my back. I handed it over to her. Written on it was just one word: shinobi. She gave it a good look. Wide-eyed comprehension dawned on her. That bad? She asked, with a serious inflection in her tone. Worse, we came together, all the shinobi, forgetting all past grievances, of which there were many, and fought one enemy and his pawns, and we were losing badly. After trailing the word etched into the headband, she wordlessly returned it to me, and I placed it back where it came from. We sat there for what felt like a very long time in complete silence while she digested the news. Kushina died, did she not? Long before her time, she suddenly said, breaking the silence. It was more a statement than a guess or a question. Yes, she died the day of my birth. Both my parents were attacked shortly after she brought me into this world. Taking advantage of the weakened seal, she interjected. My God, they died. I nodded. That's why you were made Jinchuriki long before it was time to pass on the burden, she concluded. Yes, they were able to seal the kyubi inside me with their dying breath. I never got to meet them, and until I turned 16, I didn't even know their names. I told her. So, in the end, you and Kushina both had to pay the price for my mistake, she somberly said, dropping her gaze. I don't see it that way, I objected. You couldn't have known. While true, the first few years of my life were hard, and I don't think of them fondly. They weren't all bad. They taught me many valuable lessons, the most important one being that family is everything. And if not for Kurama, I wouldn't be here today. Kurama? She wondered. The kyubi's name after some ups and downs at the beginning. We became friends, no far more than that brothers, I sighed. I miss him dearly. She clearly was surprised at hearing that admission. You gave me a lot to think about today, but one thing became clear: the kyubi cannot be allowed to be sealed in another woman. The risk of a repeat of what you told me is just too great, and if I had not already decided to give, she hesitated to use his name, Kurama, to you, this information would have made up my mind. I always wondered why every kyubi Jinchuriki that came before was female. Mito's case is easily explainable, as she had sealed Kurama within her mid-battle. Consequently, it made the decision to use Kushina as the next host questionable, with the seal weakening while giving birth. I highly doubted that Konoha was keen on burdening themselves with that risk. Neither did I think the Uzumaki clan had no male children in their midst fulfilling the requirements of becoming a Jinchuriki. That meant either Mito or the Uzumaki clan pushed for her. I didn't see Mito doing that. With her descendants living here and being a citizen of Konoha herself, the Uzumaki clan, on the other hand, was quite possible. After all, difficult birthing conditions that could result in Konoha's extinction might dissuade them from trying to breed in Uzumakis for themselves to get their hands on the highly sought-after Uzumaki blood. Such a plot would be far easier to implement with a male Jinchuriki, because it eliminated the risk of the kyubi escaping. Additionally, men are able to impregnate more than one woman at a time. They could get themselves a whole clan of descendants in the span of a single generation if enough women were to be provided. That outcome would greatly diminish the worth of an alliance with Yuzushiogakure for Konoha and bolster its strength with all the Uzumaki blood contained. So as the junior partner in this alliance, the smart thing to do was to make themselves irreplaceable. But it didn't stop the cravings if Danzo was anything to go by. Still, with Mito's offspring as an example, Danzo knew that the Uzumaki properties diminished or got lost entirely for whatever reason in certain circumstances. After all, bloodlines had to be a dominant trait for there to exist clans possessing them. He was taking an awfully great risk since he couldn't know for sure that Kushina could produce children fulfilling the requirements as a container. He couldn't have known at this time what Orochimaru could do, and to my knowledge, Kakashi was the first non-Uchiha with a successful Sharingan transplant. Was I overlooking something? In exchange, you have to promise me something, Mito implored. Anything. There was not a moment of hesitation when I responded. When I am no longer around, promise me that you are going to take care of Kushina. She is too young to live on her own, all alone. Tsuna-chan comes around all too rarely these days, she noted with regret. I will. You have my word on that. Kushina will be taken care of. She is family, after all, and no one hurts my family. I vowed. Even having never met another Uzumaki, you are cast in the same mold as the best of us, she said. You mentioned Tsunade. Why aren't you living with them in the Senju compound? Together with them and the rest of your family? I asked. My question elicited a pained expression on her face. She lamented. Oh, I did. This whole compound was erected just for appearance's sake at the start and to house Yuzushiogakure dignitaries when they were visiting Konoha. But after Tsunade's parents died, especially her mother Mai and Hashirama's only child, I could not bear being there any longer. Every item in our house only served to remind me about them. I felt like living in a house of the dead. It was suffocating and so very painful. I knew precisely what she was talking about. There was not a day that could go by when something reminded me of what I had lost. So one day, I just grabbed both Tsunade and Iwaki and moved here with them. We lived here until late last year, shortly before Kushina was expected to arrive. Tsuna-chan and Iwaki moved out. Tsuna-chan justified her action by saying she didn't want to impose on the hospitability of the next Uzumaki clan head. That didn't sound like the Tsunade Bakan I remembered, I thought to myself. Of course, it was just an excuse. She knew why Kushi-chan was sent here, and to say she is of two minds about it is an understatement. Then again, she knows Kushi is kin, family even though distant, but her arrival will herald my death, the only other person she considers close kin aside from her little brother. She, in a certain sense, sees Kushina as the one ultimately responsible for my death. The one taking away her grandmother from her. She sighed. You have to understand, she suffered greatly during her childhood. She saw everybody around her die, her closest family just gone, starting with her grandfather. In her mind, she knows the truth, that if not for Kushina, someone else would be sent, and that ultimately it is not Kushina's fault. But sometimes, it is difficult to have your mind prevail over your feelings. The sad thing in all of this is that Kushi-chan is the victim, wishing for nothing else but to have a sister in Tsunade. But she is not allowed to simply because Tsuna-chan is insisting on keeping her distance. Although they aren't that different from each other, both could benefit from a closer relationship. If only to fill the hole in their hearts. She paused for a moment. Something that hopefully might be possible, with your help. As she gave me a melancholic smile. Well, she was right. If I was to be the next Jinchuriki, that would get Kushina out of the line of fire and instead would put me in it. It wouldn't be the first time I had to change Tsunade's behavior for the better, so this might be for the best. I drained the cup. I will do my best. Tsunade Bakan deserves nothing less, I said. I cannot believe that she allowed you to call her that. She doubted my statement with a smile on her lips. To be honest, I didn't give her much choice in the matter, I said, as I reached for the necklace around my neck to show it to her. That explains a lot. But you better not let anybody see you wearing it, she warned. Right, that would invite unnecessary scrutiny. I will seal it away before going to sleep, which reminds me, is there a room and a bed I can use? The journey left me exhausted, I confessed. Of course, the room at the end of that corridor is the one prepared for you. A fresh futon, blankets, and towels are already there. If you need anything else, do not hesitate to ask. That's plenty enough. I just need some shut-eye, the rest can wait for tomorrow. Good night, Uzumaki-sama. I bowed before her and took my leave. I was surprised when I stepped into the room. It was huge and extensively furnished. I wondered about being in the wrong room until I saw the futon and the towels, which was enough that in my current state, I didn't care. I stripped most of my clothes and together with my necklace, sealed it up in one of my scrolls. I placed them all on a table and then laid down on the soft and warm futon, my tired eyes closed within moments. October 4th, year 36 AFOK. The loud chirping of birds outside the window of my room woke me up. I turned around and was greeted by warm sunbeams falling on my face. Squinting my eyes at the brightness to little effect, I resorted to shielding my eyes with my hand. Flipping myself on my back, I rubbed the sleep out from my eyes and stretched my body like a waking cat. In the process of doing so, my blanket got kicked on the floor. I moved to a sitting position and rolled my shoulders. impressed by what a good night's rest in a comfortable bed could do for one's wellness. I stood up and gave the room another once over, which confirmed I didn't misinterpret what I saw yesterday. This really was a large room. I wondered with what I earned it. Lying on a chair next to the futon was a white kimono, as my touch confirmed it was manufactured from the finest cloth, something I couldn't have afforded as a child. Later on in my life, when I could, the last thing on my mind was owning fancy clothes. Placed on top of it was a note, written in the most artful handwriting I have ever seen. You might prefer something more comfortable to wear than your rags. Mito. Thinking about it, yeah, actually I do. On the other hand, calling my badass clothes rags was a bit too much. For just a moment, I considered ignoring those clothes merely to show how awesome they were, but thought better of it. I no longer was an obstinate child, so I should start and act like it. I ended my introspection and focused on my surroundings. The only person in the vicinity was Kushina. Given her position, she must still be asleep. Strange, shouldn't she be at the academy around this time? Shrugging, I assumed that she might still be suffering from the aftermath of yesterday's ramen eating contest. I grabbed a towel as I left the room. Standing in the middle of the hallway, I wondered where I would have hidden the bathroom. This presented me with the perfect opportunity to have a closer look at the house. The little I saw yesterday was already incredible, and I had no doubt the rest wouldn't disappoint either. After taking my time exploring the house, I had to say it was breathtaking. The size and the love for detail were just mind-blowing. My old apartment didn't even compare, so merely using the same terms to describe this kitchen, and the one in my apartment felt just wrong. They were so far apart in functionality, equipment, and just general awesomeness that it felt like the right thing to do would be to come up with a new term to call it, simply to make the difference between a kitchen and this more clear. The same could be said about every other room I stepped into. It took me a while to shake off the impression the house had on me, and more than once, I had to ask myself how loaded was the Uzumaki clan. This house made it seem as if the Hyuga and Uchiha were nothing but beggars in comparison. The fifth door I opened ended my search for the moment, since I found myself standing in the bathroom, and in the same way, the whole house took my breath away. It was no different. The ground and the wall were plastered with white marble, carved into it were different motifs. For the most part, it consisted of fish or other sea creatures. It gave the whole room the feeling as if it was wholly underwater and allowed for an unobstructed view of your surroundings. It was a nice touch and must have cost a fortune. In the back of the room, there was an in-the-ground sunken bathtub. A good deal larger than my old living room. Stairs allowed one the slow descent in its confines, which easily could allow a whole family to bathe together. I had a hard time calling this a bath in my mind. Admittedly, I visited hot springs in the past which were smaller than this. I stripped out of the only article of clothing I still wore, placed the towel on a small marble shelf, and walked down the steps to the center of the tub, marveling that the edge of it reached above my hip while I was still standing upright. My attention was drawn to a set of seals on the wall. Each one was labeled with a different word. I tried to push a little chakra into the one with water written on it, and immediately the tub started to fill up with water. To my misfortune, it was freezing cold, which caused me to reach for the seal labeled fire. The good news was that it indeed increased the temperature of the water within the tub. The bad news, the freezing water was now steaming hot, and I was jumping around to prevent my feet from burning up. I deactivated the fire seal, and slowly but surely, the temperature started to drop as the hot water mixed with the additional water streaming from the water seal. It didn't take long for the temperature to pass the pleasant warm mark and started to cool down again. Since I was convinced that there should be more settings than steaming hot and freezing cold, I tried activating the fire seal again. This time, though, I took great care in how much chakra I channeled through it. And behold, it worked. The water slowly started to heat in proportionate to the amount of chakra I used. After some fine-tuning, mostly owed to my shot chakra control, I managed to get the water to adopt the perfect temperature. With that hassle finally over, I enjoyed the bath. Once more, being reminded that you usually don't appreciate the small things life has to offer until you find yourself deprived of them. I leaned against the smooth marble and closed my eyes, thinking that I could use my time in the bath at least somewhat meaningful, and tried to get a grasp on my willful chakra. There simply was no way I could allow myself the luxury to allow it to stay this way, and as a result, it kept me from utilizing a vast degree of my jutsu repertoire and abilities. I could call myself lucky if I still could manage so much as a one-handed Rasengan at this point. It was an untenable situation. Should I get into a fight, I would have to fight my chakra to a greater degree than my opposition. I really hoped that I wouldn't be separated from Kurama for too long. In the event, I managed to get accustomed to my current state. Because getting him back might shoot my chakra control once more, and I would have to start all over again. Not a situation I would like to find myself in. especially not with the start of the Second Shinobi World War on the horizon. I needed to be at my best. Despite my misgiving about what that would mean for Mito, I knew there was no other option, and I soothed myself with the knowledge that independent of my arrival, she would have transferred him to Kushina in a few days anyway. This way, I might even spare Kushina the self-loathing and hate she otherwise might have felt for my nine-tailed friend for taking away her Obasan. I entered a deep state of meditation and even went so far as to extend my awareness to the nature energy flowing around me. However, I didn't dare to touch it. For obvious reasons, I wasn't keen on ending up a statue, which without a doubt would have been the result in my current state. I circulated the chakra within my body and lost myself in doing various chakra control exercises with it. When I opened my eyes to puny skin and the feeling of cold water around me up to my torso-submerged body, the results of my hour-long training sessions were varied but helped me in getting a clear picture of what jutsu I should rather not attempt. I dunked my head one last time under the water and then waded through the water towards my towel. Right, in my morning drowsiness, I forgot to take some actual clothes with me other than the underwear I wore coming here. A bad habit that I formed while living alone. Something that I was better off breaking before I ended up in an awkward situation. Kushina, to my great relief, was still in her room and, according to her energy activity, still sleeping. I grabbed the towel and started to rub myself dry when I sensed somebody entering the Uzumaki compound and closing the distance to the house fast. I knew that particular signature rather well, which meant I might get into quite some trouble if I was found this way. I hurried up to remove the water sticking to my body. The instant I finished, I put the towel around my hips. A short touch was all it took at another seal, and the water was drained from the tub. Meanwhile, I proceeded to leave the bathroom fully expecting the visitor to stop at the front door for someone to come and open it. I, of course, should have known better. Hence I ended up blaming the soft bed for my lack of caution and awareness. It was a dangerous thing to return home and to grow too comfortable with amenities. To start feeling safe and drop your guard altogether. In my defense, compared to where I came from, it couldn't get any safer than here. Still, this would have consequences when suddenly the door swung open, and standing in the doorframe at the other end of the hallway was none other than Tsunade. She was looking at me with incomprehension clearly pasted on her face, my expression probably not any better. We stared at each other for a moment. The open door allowed a balmy breeze of fresh air into the house and reminded me painfully, by causing goosebumps as I was hit with it, that I was only wearing a towel right in front of her. I loudly gulped. Even if it had been a few years from my perspective since Tsunade had died, I could still vividly remember her temper as if it was only yesterday when I was on the receiving end of it the last time. What exacerbated the situation, back then, she considered me as her adopted son, grandson, or something along those lines. I wasn't a total stranger half-naked standing in the hallway of her grandmother's home. I could see how her hand slowly formed into a fist, and her face became flushed with anger. My mind was racing, searching for ways to escape my predicament when suddenly Kushina, still half asleep, came down the stairs, which conveniently ended in the middle of the hallway. Tsunade and I had our standoff. Her gaze, with still half-lidded eyes, found me first. "Oniai-chan, what are you doing there standing in the middle of the hallway half-naked?" she asked, yawning. Only after I had given her no response, she followed my gaze and saw Tsunade standing there. "What are you doing here?" she asked with a barely disguised hostile undertone. "If you're searching for Mito Obasan, she isn't here." With those words spoken, she slowly proceeded to walk away, no longer caring about us. I was not sure she comprehended the full extent of what she saw in her sleep-addled state. Luckily, I was able to overcome my surprise faster than Tsunade, which gave me ample opportunity to dash forward and flee into my room before she had time to react. I closed the door behind me and was about to reach for one of my scrolls to unseal another set of my clothes when I noticed the kimono Mito so graciously provided was still lying where I left it. Consequently, I changed my mind. I grabbed the kimono with the Uzumaki swirl on its back and put it on. My scrolls, despite not containing anything important or compromising, left the room with me, safely tucked in between the orange obi and the kimono. To my surprise, I sensed Tsunade following Kushina into the kitchen, which made my improvised precautions rather superfluous. I thanked the lucky star I was born under, left my room, and followed the scent of food. Carefully peeking through the ajar door, I slowly opened it to get a good look into the kitchen behind it. I expected to run right into an ambush, only to learn my hesitance was for naught, since no angry Tsunade was lying in wait for me to emerge and pounce on me. Instead, I found her leaning on a wall, with her arms crossed under her, watching the cooking Kushina. "Who was that guy?" she probed. "And don't think for a second I'd fall for that Naruto Oniai-chan routine you tried to sell me." How the redhead exclaimed, "What are you talking about? What routine? He's my Oni-chan, and that's it." So, you are telling me you aren't the least bit suspicious of a stranger just appearing out of the blue, who then gets invited to live with you and grandmother? Tsunade questioned. What's there to be suspicious about someone visiting his family? Kushina wondered, not taking the eyes off her food. Family? He doesn't have red hair. Tsunade started only to be interrupted by Kushina stating the obvious. You don't either. Tsunade ignored that comment with a glare aimed at Kushina's back. Even if he is an Uzumaki, isn't it strange that I've never heard of him? Nor has Mito ever mentioned someone like him. Moa, what's wrong with you? Kushina threw up her arms, annoyed, and turned around, facing Tsunade. Cooking spoon raised, she began berating Tsunade. Second-guessing everything. He's Naruto Oni-chan. There's no ulterior motive, no secret plot for you to uncover, and if there was, what do you care? Oba-san and I can handle it on our own. I don't need your meddling in our business, Mrs. I'm not part of your family. That shut her up hard. In order to not let this argument get even more out of hand, I harumphed vocally. Is it a bad time to ask for some of your deliciously smelling eggs? Kushina's response consisted of giving me a deadpan stare. You can make yourself something to eat, Oni-chan. She pointed out, emphasizing every single syllable of the moniker she bestowed upon me. I'm hurt, still salty about losing to me, I quipped. She insisted, I'm not cooking for you, emphasizing her refusal with her signature glare. Are you sure about that? You know, I might be persuaded to invite you to eat another round of ramen for lunch. In the event I would just so happen to have stuffed myself with the delicious homemade cooking of my little Haim beforehand, which I, of course, wouldn't be able to refuse, as I could never bear to see her disappointed or angry with me. I wouldn't be able to eat as much ramen as I did yesterday. So by cooking for me, you may just be able to improve your chances of winning against me considerably, I lectured her with mock seriousness. Her left eyelid started twitching. Are you suggesting that I can't win against you without cheating? No, of course not, I said in mock dismay. I'm saying it is your only chance at beating me. She slammed her plate on the table. I'm so gonna beat you, fair and square, and show you exactly who you dared to mess with, Databane. She declared, enthusiastic until her verbal tic shone through, and immediately used her hands to cover her mouth. I smirked at her, mostly for being successful to hear her say Databane, and less so for riling her up. I believe it when I see it, Haim-chan. I sing-songed my nickname for her. She started grumbling under her breath something about cocky blondes, and it didn't escape me that she could have meant either one of us with this, since Tsunade shared my hair color. That probably was the reason she felt like commenting. I didn't know Mito-oba-san lifted the ramen rule, only allowing you to eat them every 2 days. Well, that would explain why my grand scheme to have her cook for me didn't work. I gave Kushina an unimpressed stare. Well played, little one, for now, I conceded. I went to the cupboards and looked at the carefully labeled sealing scrolls I found in there to get an idea of what was possible to cook with the ingredients contained within. Ultimately, I decided to follow Kushina's example and put some eggs with an assortment of vegetables in a frying pan. I hesitated a moment, turned to Tsunade, and asked, You want something too? No, was her curt response. Suit yourself, I said, and put the pan over the flame of the stove. After a minute, it seemed she gathered her courage to address me directly. Who are you? And what are you doing here? She asked with the bluntness of a sledgehammer. Whoa, do you always start with the hard-to-answer questions right off the bat? I mean, you already saw me naked, and now you want to strip my soul, too. Isn't there some kind of order to those things? At least where I'm from, you usually have to invite the other person to a meal or two. Go stargazing, and then if both parties are willing, you get to touch and kiss, and somewhere way down the line, we get to naked bodies and a loaded question about the meaning of life. I mocked her. What makes you think I'd be interested? You are even dumber than my teammate, she said, outraged at my insinuation. Which teammate? Orochimaru or Jiraiya? I asked with a half-turned head and raised eyebrows. How do you know that? She asked with barely contained anger. Please, I shrugged. As if it wouldn't be common knowledge exactly who the students of 3rd Hokage are. You still didn't answer my question. She doubled down. What gave you the impression I'd be willing to? I wondered out loud. Perhaps the way I tried to avoid the question and steer the topic away from myself to other things? Or was it my cheeky attitude? I demanded. She suddenly snapped as my mocking became too much for her to endure. The atmosphere, which so far I did my best to keep pleasant, shifted at her outbreak as I turned serious. The amusement was gone from my voice as I turned to face her. You demand? I repeated after her. With what right do you demand anything from me? Within the confines of another clan, a clan I just so happen to belong to? I stressed, the only thing you can do is to ask nicely in the hopes that I decide to divulge any information. Since I all but outright said I'm unwilling to, there is absolutely nothing you can do about it, is there? She gritted her teeth. I sighed. I know you aren't this obtrusive to satisfy your own curiosity. I assume it has something to do with you worrying about your grandmother and Kushina. Don't. There is absolutely no reason for that. Contrary to what you might believe or try to persuade yourself of. I'm not a stranger and certainly no threat to either one of them. I tried to mollify her, but a glance her way was enough to make it clear I was unsuccessful in my attempt. Unfortunately, there is nothing else I can do in order to make you believe my motives are pure. So you have to make do with just my word. Rest assured, all relevant parties, including the Hokage, are informed about me and the reason for my presence. And to be frank, you neither belong to that circle nor is your security clearance anywhere near high enough to be allowed to know. Now, does this satisfy you any more than my previous answers, Jonin Senju Tsunade? No, it doesn't, she said. Didn't think it would, but that is all that you are gonna get. Feel free to stay around and try to learn more, shake something else loose, get me to comment on something, and puzzle me out. It's your time that you're wasting, after all. I challenged her. She snorted. I'll take you up on that then. Well, that was too easy, as I suspected even her younger self couldn't decline a challenge. Someone really should make her aware of this character flaw lest someone less respectable takes advantage of that. According to the smell, my eggs were finished. I grabbed a scroll labeled bread, unsealed a small loaf, and took it together with a plate filled with eggs to sit across from Kushina. I purposely allowed Tsunade to stay at my back. Thereby I was making a clear statement. That neither did I need to keep my eyes on her nor that I think of her as a threat. Kushina eyed me curiously, her mouth full, her chewing momentarily interrupted as if she was seeing me for the first time. I wondered what that was about. Giving Tsunade lip? Something I doubted happened often for various reasons, her being the student of the third, acting Senju clan head and an incredibly beautiful woman, or was it something else? Could it be it just now seeped and she didn't know me, but despite that, had been spending the night in the same house as myself? I halted the loaded fork in my hand on the way into my mouth before it could reach it because there was still an unanswered question I needed an answer to. So, why aren't you in the academy, young lady? Still suffering from the consequences of challenging the great Naruto-sama? She swallowed the contents of her mouth without chewing them further, and after taking a huge gulp from her glass to wash it down, and to keep herself from choking, she remarked. Mito Oba-san asked me to stay home today. She said something about our guest needing a guide or something. Apart from that, she also wanted to help me with this stupid Bunshin Jutsu after she returned, which is required to pass the Konoha graduation. I only got this week left to get it down. I nearly choked on my food. Well, she definitely was family. Is everything alright, Oniai-chan? Kushina asked concerned. Yeah, the food just went into the wrong pipe. Say, is there a reason why didn't you learn the jutsu back in Yuzushiogakure? I questioned. In Yuzushiogakure, we didn't have to learn such stupid jutsu, she said frustrated. TSS, stupid jutsu, perhaps you just aren't ready to become a shinobi, Tsunade remarked derogatorily. I could understand Tsunade's resentment given the situation. She was probably hoping for Kushina to fail. And in case she doesn't make the cut, it would result in Mito getting to live a little longer should the higher-ups declare Kushina as unfit to be a Jinchuriki. But to attack her this harshly was a bit much. Well, there's nothing wrong with having problems learning the Bunshin no Jutsu. First of all, it's a crap jutsu. Not even a genin would fall for it. I always wondered why it's even taught in the academy. Secondly, what all future greatest shinobi have in common is that they've never learned to perform this jutsu as a genin. I lectured, firmly convinced, in the truthfulness of my statement. In the background, Tsunade snorted. Yeah, right, the best fail at an E-rank technique makes sense. All the shinobi I know had no problem with learning it. Shrugging, I said, well, that just shows how little you know, doesn't it? The slightly mocking undertone in that statement elicited a smirk from Kushina. Since you are in a room with two shinobi, who both have trouble with this very jutsu, both are or will be among the best shinobi you will ever meet. Right, Kushi-chan? You can bet your life on it, Kushina told her. Good girl, I praised and gave her a pat on the head. That made her beam at me. Now let's eat up, so I can show you an even better jutsu. Probably the same your Oba-san wanted to show you. Yes. She screamed and started to bolt down her food. Whoa, slow down a little, you are aware you have to wait till I have finished too before we can start. At the comprehension, she slowed down and resumed chewing. It took her another 3 minutes to finish her meal, after which she started to harass me, making side remarks to eat faster and the like. It would have been hilarious to watch if I wouldn't have been the target of her antics. Of course, I could have made a kagebunshin at any time to start instructing her, while my real self indulged in my breakfast. But similar to Tsunade's challenging nature, Kushina was impatient to a staggering degree, as I was during my childhood. Irika must have had the patience of a saint to endure prolonged exposure to my extroverted and impatient self. A virtue I should adopt for myself. After all, I couldn't rightfully go around criticizing people without being aware of my own shortcomings. Although I managed to rein them in, to a certain degree, my bad habits still flare up from time to time. So this was as much training for me as it was for her. A short glance to the back confirmed Tsunade needed a tempering, too. The annoyance was clear to see, which served to give this whole situation a different spin. Considering Kushina's dislike of Tsunade, she could be doing this whole routine to get rid of her. To my regret, there was no way to find out for sure aside from directly asking her, and the chances to get a truthful answer were non-existent. When my plate was finally empty, I was practically dragged outside by Kushina. She led me at the seam of my kimono through some backyard exit, and we left the house towards the direction of the lake, only to stop when we got close to the shore. She then whirled around demanding, "Now show me this super-duper technique." "Yeah, show us," Tsunade derisively added. "You know, being stared at like I am by the two of you would suffice for a lesser man to get performance anxiety," I joked. Kushina darted her head to the side in a questioning manner, not getting the reference. Not allowing her the time to formulate the question on the tip of her tongue, I put my fingers in a familiar position, and after molding a little chakra, another me popped up next to me. I was a little put off by my performance since there was a huge white cloud accompanying my clone springing into existence, hiding both me and my clone from view for a few seconds. A clear sign of wasted chakra owed to my current lack of perfect chakra control. Something I was sure didn't escape Tsunade. Kushina, on the other hand, was staring dumbly at me. "Oni-chan," she fumed. "Didn't you say you'd teach me an awesome jutsu?" "I did, and I'm about to," my shadow clone responded. She interrupted my clone. "Then why are you making a bunshin?" "You really need to learn to allow others to finish speaking," I chided playfully. "I was about to tell you. So listen up. First of all, this is not a regular bunshin," she was about to protest, but the raised hand of the clone stilled her. "This jutsu is called kagebunshin. It creates a real tangible doppelganger of yourself, who even can use jutsu." "Really?" She wondered and was already touching my real self, not the clone that just spoke to her. "I'm the clone," my other self proclaimed. Her eyes widened, proclaiming, "No way." And she ran over to him, to touch him in the same manner. "Awesome." "Exactly, as I was saying. Secondly, by learning this jutsu you not only get some great utility in more than one way. It will also allow you to pass the bunshin portion of the genin exam with flying colors. 2. At this point, Tsunade decided to intercede. "You can't honestly be trying to teach the kagebunshin to her. It is a B-rank genjutsu for a very good reason. This jutsu is dangerous. The chakra requirements alone could kill her. Most chunin don't have enough to perform this technique without risk for themselves." "Well, Kushina isn't most. She is an Uzumaki," I said. "What does that have to do with her learning the jutsu?" Tsunade asked, not getting what I alluded to. I couldn't blame her. Even though she was distantly related to the clan, she wouldn't have regular contact with the secluded inhabitants of Yuzushiogakure. As a result, the knowledge might not be at the forefront of her mind. I sighed. "Well, what are the Uzumaki known for besides being masters of Fuinjutsu?" I questioned. Her momentarily scrunching her face told me she got it. Kushina saw the need to speak it out. "Our near-endless endurance and high chakra reserves." "Exactly. People with high chakra reserves are known to have difficulties controlling what they have at their disposal. In order for the average Uzumaki to be able to make a normal bunshin, he or she would need chakra control on a level most jonin don't possess. This problem is further complicated by the fact that Konoha usually starts their shinobi on more difficult chakra control exercises as a genin and beyond," I pointed out. "As you can see," I addressed Kushina, "the village didn't provide you or anybody else with high chakra reserves with the necessary tools to succeed at learning this technique, which in your case nearly could have prevented you from becoming a genin. Quite the outrage if you asked me. After all, you possess an incredible advantage over other shinobi, which would undoubtedly allow you to become an incredible ninjutsu specialist a few years down the line. But instead, you were nearly held back, and might have even been labeled as a failure, because the teaching staff didn't consider you might have just too much and a too powerful chakra to perform a cantrip. So I'm awesome because I can't do the normal Bushin? She asked uncertainly. No, you are awesome because you are you, and you will be even more awesome with the Kagebunshin at your disposal. So let me explain how it is done, I said. First, you need to mold chakra, then disperse it equally throughout your body. Imagine it like a second skin you form around yourself, then when you get that far you make the cross hand seal. And while you are performing the hand seal accompanied by changes to your chakra, this results in you have to imagine yourself separating into two equal parts. Huh, that doesn't sound too difficult. She mused. Well, most techniques don't when dumbed down to the essentials, but this technique didn't get ranked B for its chakra requirements. It was declared forbidden because of it. It is not an easy technique to learn, so don't let yourself get discouraged if you don't get it immediately. Understood, I told her. Yeah, Uzumaki Kushina doesn't give up, Oni-chan, she affirmed. Good, then get to work. If you manage to get a single functioning clone till lunch, I will personally persuade Mito to suspend her ramen rule for today, I said. Yada, she cheered and went to work. After I had confirmed she was on the right track by closely watching her chakra through my sensor abilities, I sat down on a nearby rock and tried to enjoy the scenery. Tsunade stayed close by and mulled something over. You know, you could try to learn the jutsu yourself, I said to her, leaning back on my perch. Instead of just standing around watching me, I'm flattered. Don't get too full of yourself, she hissed back. So you aren't interested? I asked. In you, hell no, she seethed. That was not what I meant, I tried to clarify. The jutsu, Kagebunshin, is a great tool, and I have yet to meet a shinobi with the chakra required to use it who didn't benefit from knowing it in some fashion. I paused for a moment only to needle her while smirking by saying, Oh, I get it. You are scared, Kushina, that according to you, talentless shinobi might take less time learning it than you. A quite substantiated fear. She would never let you live it down, and neither may I. You are out of your mind, she glowered. Really? Am I? Then you certainly won't have any trouble to convince me from the opposite. I looked at her. How about a little bet? I offered. If Kushina wins, you will be the one not only paying for our ramen meal, but you will also persuade your grandmother to allow it. And should I win? She questioned. I don't know, think of something, I told her. It won't matter, because you won't win against Kushina. You have got quite some confidence in the abilities of a child you just met, she scoffed. Might be, or perhaps I know something you don't. Who knows? I shrugged. So what about it? Do you accept the wager? Yes, and should I win, you will answer all the questions I have, she declared. Sure, I played down the issue. Not that it will come to that. I was sure of that, at least because, for someone like Tsunade with her less potent chakra, an additional step in learning the jutsu was needed, increasing the density of the chakra spread throughout her body to create a hard shell being able to contain the rest. She undoubtedly would figure it out. She was a smart woman, after all. But by the time she did, Kushina would be close or should already have succeeded in learning the jutsu. I couldn't suppress my smirk by thinking of a free Ichiraku ramen buffet. Hey, Kushina! I shouted. Tsunade said if you can learn the jutsu faster than her, she is paying for our ramen. So don't let me down, Haim. She returned the brightest of smiles and redoubled her efforts. Tsunade was about to start when a hawk descended upon our position. It landed in front of us carrying a note tied around its foot. It is a summon from the Hokage. The compound doesn't allow for ANBU to enter it, Tsunade said. Ah, that would explain it. I reached down to the bird and removed the message. Well, seems like you have to decide the winner without me. Don't cheat. I warned her. Haim, the Hokage wants to talk to me. So when I return, I expect you to have one. You got it! She exclaimed. With that said, I started the march toward the Hokage tower. I noticed someone tailing me not long after I left the confines of the compound. Have I already aroused Danzo's suspicion, or is this someone sent by the Hokage? Too bad, that without Kurama, I would have to ask to be sure either way. I refrained from doing so. Danzo would be dealt with, in due time, and his position in the here and now is a lot weaker than it will be in the future, meaning his hands were tied. The only thing he could do to annoy me would be to withdraw his saboteurs and Yuzushiyogakure, since this might prevent the attack on Yuzu. But a single Yuzu shinobi for which he clearly had to suspect me of being shouldn't warrant such a step. To destroy their over years carefully made plans, Madara wouldn't stand for it. And why should they? I'm just one man, a potential asset to revive the Uzumaki clan in Konoha, And should I turn out to be a threat in any way, shape, or form, or to be asking the wrong question, I'm sure to find myself on a mission that will go horribly wrong. So a nonentity, but that, of course, didn't mean he wasn't curious. Well, how goes the saying, curiosity killed the cat? This time around I didn't search for a chunin to escort me to the Hokage. Instead, I went straight for his office. Manning the front desk was the same auburn-haired woman I already knew from yesterday. Naruto-san, please proceed. The Hokage is awaiting your arrival, she said without any emotional inflection in her tone, with pure unadulterated professionalism. Thank you, miss? Hataki, Kana Hataki? I nearly tripped at hearing that. It couldn't be, right? On the other hand, it would make a lot of sense that Kakashi was born this year 15th of September, last month. If his mother was an ANBU, she would be on leave, and reinstating her would take time, a few months, for her to get back into things, in which she could be tasked with being the Hokage's secretary. Small world, I honestly didn't think to run into her while not outright searching for her. Is something wrong? She asked. Oh no, I just thought the name kinda fit you. She didn't even twitch, not one for flattery this one. She opened the double doors, and I stepped inside. The Hokage was sitting behind a new desk that outwardly wasn't any different than his last one, and if not for me knowing he destroyed his last one, I wouldn't have noticed. Hokage-sama, you wanted to see me. The doors closed behind me, and I barely made 2 steps in the room when he threw something my way, without dignifying me with a single glance my way. I caught it with little trouble and was staring at a Konoha headband in my hands. I will instate you as a jonin effective immediately. Thank you, Hokage-sama. Don't thank me, he glowered. I'd have liked nothing more than to deny you becoming part of my forces. But your benefactor, who not only made you part of her clan but also made a strong case in your favor and laid it out in no uncertain terms what not accepting you would ultimately come down to. He looked up from the papers on his desk and fixated me with his piercing eyes as he continued to say. So you see, I was given no other choice, with her mind already made up, and I've learned not to try to sway the opinion of an Uzumaki, Mito-sama in particular. And I don't need the headache of you running around accountable to none. So you better don't make me regret this. Didn't plan on it, I said with a smile. Easy discernible, I had no intention whatsoever to stay true to those words. I feared as much. He dryly commented, tomorrow 10 o'clock, there will be an obligatory meeting of all jonin not on a mission or on guard duty. I expect you to be there. Of course, Hokage-sama. If there is nothing else, you are dismissed, I bowed and left his office. It seemed like Mito was hard at work. I wondered what else she had done this morning. Suddenly my musings were interrupted when I sensed 2 identical presences from the Uzumaki compound, and I had to grin, imagining the face Tsunade is no doubt making this instant at being bested by a genin. Too bad I missed it. Well, the important thing, after all, was to save some money and to humble Tsunade and get her to interact with Kushina. I made my way back to the compound, my shadow still accompanying me. When I reached the lake, I saw 3 smug grinning Kushina standing around watching Tsunade's unsuccessful efforts to replicate Kushina's feat. One of the Kushina took notice of my approach and beamed all over her face. I won, Oniai-chan. Do you see? Yep, I do. Just as I told you. Taking a closer look at Tsunade's progress showed me she was close and already figured out the additional step. And a second after I had that thought, 2 Tsunade were standing in the clearing. She was short of breath, not solely from creating this clone alone but from all her failed attempts prior. She dispelled the clone not long after she created it. I gave her my best I told you so gaze. She just huffed and stalked away. I waited till she was about to leave hearing distance to proclaim. We eat at 12 o'clock at Ichiraku Ramen, don't forget to bring your wallet, I shouted after her. Her steps wavered a moment, but she continued her track without looking back. The 3 Kushina giggled, and the one closest to me high-fived me. So, since you got this jutsu down so fast, how about I teach you another one? I asked her. Really? Sure, I confirmed, but only if you want me to. Of course, what will it be this time? An awesome dragon of doom jutsu or a fire jutsu to burn them all? She became a dangerous glint in the corner of her eyes at mentioning fire. A little pyromaniac, good to know. It took a mental note to not teach her any fire jutsu away from a huge water source. Well, not exactly. I thought of something a little more basic. How is your hench? I asked. Her mood turned sour, and her shoulders slouched. That bad? Not really surprising. The one they teach at the academy is also just a cantrip, a weak illusion like the bunshin that is put over the caster, which is why it is recommended to use this jutsu only to imitate people with similar and bigger builds, since it doesn't turn the parts of the body protruding from the illusion invisible. Well, it's not surprising, I remarked. The henge also requires far too little chakra for someone like you to get it right. I'll show you the improved variant. Deep down, I knew that not every shinobi academy in the elemental nations would have the same requirements. My run-in with Zabuza and his story about their final exam made that more than clear. The question was, what did they learn back in Yuzu? Fuinjutsu more than likely. No bunch in the elemental ones require a basic understanding of one element, and not every affinity opens up that venue. So, it would not make much sense to even try. Adding to this is the fact not everyone has a knack for elemental manipulation. There is a fair number of shinobi that got somewhere without a single elemental jutsu to their name. So trying to press them into a category might hamper their development. So what else was there? I put answering the question on the back burner and put my focus back on my eager student. Here, this is my version of the henge, a real transformation, I said, and with a poof of smoke, I turned it into a little fox kit. Her 3 iterations were confused for a moment, surely questioning where I went, until one of them looked down. The first word I heard was kawaii, from 3 mouths simultaneously, and I knew I was in big trouble. October 4th night, early lunchtime, October 5th year 36 AFOK. As it turned out, Tsunade was a lousy loser. She didn't have the dignity to show up in person for the meal while enduring being made fun of. Instead, she came by Ichiraku and told him she would pay for everything we ate and would bring the money the next day. I wasn't amused and hypothesized I might have teased her a little bit too much, but dismissed that thought as fast as it came to mind. This screamed for some kind of retribution, the question being what prank is appropriate for this situation. Mito and I each had our reason for being angry at Tsunade's behavior. Kushina, on the other hand, couldn't be happier. Not having to suffer her presence while eating on her tab. And boy did she take advantage. Every bowl she had was filled with more extras than their usual content. She even went so far as to order a dozen bowls to go for her second dinner later in the day. To Kushina's and my surprise, Mito allowed it, without so much as an objection. Might have been an allowance since Kushina did not challenge me again to a ramen eating contest. I personally doubted she learned her lesson. It probably was her way of thanking me for teaching her by not trying to thrash me. And I had to emphasize the word try. She might think differently, but I wouldn't allow myself to be dethroned as the ramen king, ever. Subsequently, we went home. I helped Kushina refine the 2 jutsu I taught her earlier in the day. Meanwhile, Mito vanished somewhere in the house. For me, the day ended a few hours later after the second ramen buffet courtesy of Kushina, who was nice enough to share some of her loot. After that, I didn't stick around for long and went to my room. Utilizing the help of a few kagebunshin, I enlarged the shiki fuin on my stomach. Nowadays, I have lost count of how many times I had to fix it in some fashion. It was high time I replaced it with the labor of my hard work. Now that Kurama wasn't in it, and a slight mistake could have cost me my life, I had free rein to adapt and evolve it. Unfortunately, there was only so much that could be built on top of something if the foundation wasn't designed for it. I had to be ready should the worst case come to pass, and the current seal on my stomach wouldn't hold up to what would be required of it even though powered by the Shinigami with my father's soul as brickstone. It needed to become more, and I had an idea of how to achieve that. We were jumping from tree to tree. I could sense another presence being snuffed out. I increased my speed again, despite knowing that we wouldn't make it in time. We were just too far away. My companions, who already struggled to keep up with me before I made haste, slowly fell behind. I didn't care. Instead, I cursed Sakura and pushed myself even further. When I finally reached the site where the battle took place, the attackers had already retreated, leaving behind a battlefield with dozens of shinobi strewn about, their innards adorning the ground, the stink of death lingering about amidst the simmering flames marking the places fire jutsu connected with their surroundings. Lying against a tree I found her, Sakura. She was the last to die, her body a wrangled mess, her limbs cut away from her and the torso littered with hundreds of wounds, where jutsu and kunai penetrated her flesh over and over again until her chakra finally ran out, and her regeneration jutsu stopped working. Only then did she die. Tortured to death. Stupid woman, why would you destroy your Horatian marker? You were the only one left, the only one as hard to kill as me, and now you left me too. And this wouldn't have been the first trap of Madara that I sprung. Damn it, Sakura, what were you thinking? I released the seal on her body containing her personal effects within them. Including the medical encyclopedia, she wrote after Tsunade's death to preserve her knowledge, as were the plans she and Tsunade worked on in their free time, their dream hospital as they called it. Having everything a doctor and their patient could ever hope to wish for. Their little project, In such a dire situation we found ourselves in, everybody needed something to hang on to in order not lose hope, and what better way was there than to plan for the after? I pocketed it. My hands balled into fists at my side, I gave her a last silent salute, and then I took off. There were no tears left in my body to be shed, and I had no time to waste. There were some guys in desperate need of being killed. At that moment, I didn't care what trap they laid for me. Sakura didn't want me to step into it. I had just one feeling, one desire in my entire body that needed to be sated, my hunger for revenge. I woke up in the middle of the night to the rustling of fabric close to me. I kept my eyes closed, and a sweep with my sensor power told me it was Mito, who, for some reason, was standing in my room in the middle of the night. Long before she got close enough to shake me awake, I opened my eyes and turned her way. She had her cane with her, which once more was baffled at, didn't make any sound while she walked and placed it on the ground. A silencing seal, perhaps? This begged the question, why not use the same seal to mask the other sound she makes? Must have been intentional. Only a moron would get close to a shinobi in a manner that might be construed as ill intention, especially when they are at their most vulnerable, during their sleep. Everything all right? I asked. I knew she wouldn't come to me at such a strange time if it wouldn't be important. She, after all, was around me the whole afternoon and evening, but so was Kushina, the paranoid part of my mind added. I think it would be better if we talk somewhere else, she said in response. Sensible Kushina had her room on the second floor, and the walls were thick. Nonetheless, she was a shinobi in training, better to be safe, especially if we were discussing anything she was better off not knowing. Furthermore, we couldn't risk a Hyuga having his eyes pointed at us. They usually were expert lip readers, and the barriers around the house and the compound weren't capable of hindering their sight. Not much could actually. A few high-powered barriers were protecting the compound that ran a lot of chakra through them. Enough that it at least distorted what they could make out looking in from outside the barrier. Similar to looking through a murky glass. It wouldn't be enough not to be seen. Having our lips read, on the other hand, would be all but impossible. Which sufficed for our purposes. She led me through parts of the house I hadn't been to before and ended up in front of a reinforced door. She removed a key dangling from the chain necklace around her neck and put it into a lock. The door that opened cleared the way to a spiraling staircase, leading deep down into the basement of the building. She placed her hand on the wall to her right, and along the walls, lights flared up, clearly the product of some seal work. We walked down the stairs for quite some time, deeper into the ground with every step. The purpose of the basement revealed itself to me after Mito opened up another door after reaching the bottom level. While I thought the other door was reinforced, it paled to the monster in front of me. It was a safe with hundreds of seals carved into it, one more intricate than the other, something I could infer through the visible encryption alone. When the heavy double door swung open, it gave way to an enormous room hidden behind it. It was an extensive library full of scrolls sorted into ninjutsu, taijutsu, genjutsu, and fuinjutsu portions. I have seen something like this once or twice. Clan libraries usually look exactly like that, but none I have seen before was this extensive. The genjutsu portion, the smallest one, was larger than the complete libraries of some clans combined twice over. I followed Mito inside, and the heavy doors closed behind us. She reached for the key around her neck and gave it to me. It is yours now, together with everything else the Uzumaki clan of Konoha owns, as its new clan head, she said to me. She made me her heir. No, her words had more far-reaching implications. She closed her hands painfully around mine, holding the key, and there was a sting I felt, and the key glowed for a second immediately after. Something that should not be possible. My seal should prevent that from happening without my consent. My blood leaving my body should be inert for any jutsu relying on a genetic marker of any kind. She smirked at me and released the grip on my hand, allowing me to open it. A short glance at the key made it obvious it was a masterwork, and one of the countless seals adorning it was designed to penetrate the one protecting my body fluids, which, thinking about it, makes sense it should even be a requirement for such a key lest it might be fooled. She took a step away from me. We are currently in the main hall of the Jutsu Library. Here resides the collection of jutsu I was able to gather and write down over the years, some entries I brought with me from Yuzu when I first came to Konoha to marry Hashirama. Some are copies from what I found in the Senju Library. Pointing at a heavy-looking ornamented trunk standing on a pedestal in a premier position in the library, she said, not without some bitterness and disgust in her voice, "And there are the foul creations I helped Tobarama create in a moment of weakness shortly after the death of my husband. Jutsu, I hoped, would never see the light of the day. Then you came along," she said, resigned, and I wondered, despite the atrocity, one particular jutsu turned out to be if perhaps it was the right thing to do, to cross that line. I heard those sweet words in my head, this time spoken by myself, not by Tobarama when he took advantage of me, of my grief, and for the first time since our initial success, I understood where he came from, Mito recalled, her voice nearly breaking at the end. It wasn't hard to puzzle the pieces together. The second Hokage was known for his water jutsu and the groundwork of the Hiraishin that my father brought to new never-before-seen heights, and the Edo Tensei this accursed jutsu. It all suddenly made sense, how a senju could develop a jutsu able to wrest the souls from the Shinigami. The only ones who worshipped the god of death were the Uzumaki. Of course, he must have had help. Thinking back to the notes of the Hiraishin I got my hands on, there was a clear influence on how Uzumaki would draw a seal in the Tobirama version. Comparable to my father's hand, whose knowledge in no small part must have come from my mother. This also would explain how Dad could come up with something like the Hack no Fuin Shiki, with Mom thinking herself the last Uzumaki. She undoubtedly would teach him even the best-kept secrets of the clan. Edo Tensei, Hiraishin, you helped him create them. The words I said weren't a question but an accusation. You know about them? She asked, surprised. Then things must have been dire if you or your predecessor saw the need to use them. Oh, the need was there, I confessed. But our side never used the jutsu. It was stolen by an enemy who used it against us. It was by this jutsu that Hiruzen was forced to use Hack no Fuin Shiki, summoning the Shinigami to win against the revived first and second Hokage. She paled and nearly fell down if not for my fast reflexes. I caught her and sat her down in a nearby chair. There are 2 seals I devised years after Tobirama was gone. I couldn't allow such a jutsu to exist without the means to combat it. The first applied to anyone will make sure that when they die, the hold over them by the Shinigami is absolute. They won't ever be able to escape him, and make their way back to the land of the living. I applied it to myself and Kushina, the other seal, freeze the souls from the jutsu, sending them back into death's embrace. She said. It was clear to see it disturbed her greatly how the creations she had a hand in, meant to safeguard the village, were used to destroy it. Don't worry. I had absolutely no intention to ever allow for that jutsu to be used ever again. I've fought against more than enough of my revived friends and family to last me a dozen lifetimes. As a result, preventing this from occurring ever again made it to the top of my list. I reassured her. Her seals would be useful. I was working on something similar. It might be interesting to compare notes, to see if her work could still be used against the improved version of the Edo Tensei. I hoped it wouldn't require me to test it in order to find out. She was visibly relieved to hear that. Am I right to assume you also know about the copy in the Scroll of Seals Tobirama created to collect all the dangerous but potentially useful jutsu in it? She inquired. Yes, I do, and I have my eyes upon the one who is gonna steal it, I said. Good, you cannot imagine how relieved I am to hear that after that scare you gave me. Now, where were we? You were about to tell me about the other rooms and their function, I supplied. Right, through the door behind me, you can reach the master seal of the compound. Every other seal applied somewhere in it is linked to this one and can be edited, activated, and erased from over there. The key I gave you gives you access to it. Then there is an armory filled to the brim with weapons, seals and the like, enough to equip an army, and a forge with rare materials is nearby. Then there is a huge training hall, able to simulate nearly any surrounding imaginable you design and place on a memory seal. She explained. Listening to that, I had to suppress the urge to try it out. Such a room was of incredible value. In wars, the home field advantage couldn't be regarded as high enough. Even during the Fourth Shinobi World War, in which the fighting forces should have learned from the past, it was astounding what some Suna puppeteers could do while fighting on sand or Kirinine were capable of with water nearby was just frightening. It is no easy feat to recreate those environments. The villagers sure tried, but those simulacra never came close to the real deal. I have also established a record room where I keep all the originals of the dealings of our clan. Next to it, there is a small library mostly filled with old history texts. It is also where I stored a not insubstantial part of the wealth of the clan in various forms. Money and gold are just 2 of them. The rest can be accessed through the Konoha Bank. Ownership of everything was transferred to you, in order to accelerate the whole process. Their bureaucracy sometimes takes forever, and I did not want to risk anything or anybody trying something with those funds. It made sense since I wasn't her direct descendant. They could have tried to make a case against us about who is the rightful successor to get some kind of concession from either me or Tsunade, whoever they finally decide to go with. Doing something like this could hurt them in the short term should it get out, but depending on what they set out to gain, it might still be worth it. In particular, if somebody else was pulling the strings in the background, someone like Danzo, for example. It seemed like she considered everything. I, in her shoes, might have forgotten it, and never really got the chance to handle anything funding-related. By the time I wore the hat, there wasn't much left that needed oversight. The very centerpiece of this underground structure is made up of a room designed for the transfer of the Kyubi. An exact copy of the one Hashirama and I built outside the village walls. The reinforcements used to build it should be capable of withstanding and hiding the transfer so that only those noisy Hyugas should notice it taking place, in case they are actively looking for it. This way, the higher-ups all not informed can only guess who is the new Kyubi Jinchuriki, you or Kushina, or perhaps might even assume I died before I could choose a successor. Which might work in our favor. It also means no enemy would know for sure until it's confirmed, and it allows for some mind games. You're one scary woman. Someone ever told you that? I complimented her. Who knows? She said with a soft smile on her lips. I have taken the liberty to write up a summary of all the important dealings our clan had with the village and its inhabitants. The associated duties and where to find the contracts, so no one can take advantage of you at the start of your tenure. She also insistently warned, do not let yourself get outsmarted. Many will try. I won't. I promise. Do not promise me something like that, she sternly lectured. There is no need at the end of the day. I could not care any less about some money. What I care about are the people in my family, so I expect you to uphold your promise to protect them. Especially Kushina and Tsunade, both will need you in the days to come. Do not allow them to push you away. There is one more thing, she said. I want to make another request of you, and with a dose of anxiety, preempted a request. Whatever it was she intended to ask of me was a matter close to her heart, something that went beyond duty and obligation. Everything I responded without a moment's hesitation. Make sure they are happy. Existing without a spark of happiness is worse than everything else. Do not let it come to that. You have to promise me. This time, as Mito was asking for my word, she nearly begged me. I knew what she was talking about, probably better than anybody. There was a time when I was about to walk the same path as Tsunade when I first met her and called her out on closing her heart, shying away from allowing others to get close to her, dereliction of her duties, and how naive I have been. No, I wouldn't allow Tsunade to fall into this abyss this time around, and neither would Kushina make the acquaintance with this special form of misery. I will, I promise, and Uzumaki Naruto never goes back on his word, I vowed. Good, she said with a relieved smile, then let us get started. I helped her back to her feet, and she escorted me to a huge room. The walls, ceiling, and floor were covered with seals. Shortly after we stepped into the room properly, the door automatically closed behind us. She moved into the middle of the room and turned to me. Show me your seal, she demanded. By uttering those words, my fears and my hopes were all verified at the same time. I removed the top of the white yukata I wore and showed Mito the seal on my stomach. It had been modified no 12 hours before in a series of ways, making the original base of the Shiki few and unrecognizable, having evolved beyond what my father ever thought possible. She traced the lines on my stomach, and despite the encryption still in place, an accomplished seal master can make some educated guesses about the function and complexity of a seal. Do you want to see it for real? I asked her. There is no need. I have seen what I was looking for. This astounding work will have no trouble holding it, Mito mused. It was far more than I could have hoped for. It is, I confirmed. It was so much more than just a simple containment seal, like the one she used on herself, nothing like the seal she intended to use on Kushina designed, with it hardly allowing for the Biju chakra to be used. Dad had the right idea but didn't go all the way to its final conclusion in fear of Kurama, not something that was gonna stop me. Then let us start. Step inside the circle drawn on the ground. She commanded and pointed at one of the two circles and moved over to another one, close to the first, barely a meter separating them. The transfer seal I drew should have no problems getting my prisoner to you. In case something goes wrong, I trust you can handle it? She asked with a raised eyebrow. My advanced age and the loss of the Biju might weaken me to a point at which I will no longer be able to interfere. I'll manage, I said. Admittedly, I was more worried about her. She nodded at hearing my reassurance and laid down on the ground right in the center of the seal. There is one last thing I have to ask of you when it is done. Can you return me to my bed? I do not want it to end here, on this cold floor, she beseeched me. It won't, I reassured her. She gifted me with a smile. And with a flick of her chakra, she activated the seals spread through the room and loosened the grip on the prison holding Kurama, opening the door just a crack. A second later, the escaping chakra was channeled into me, gathered, and focused in my stomach. His chakra invading my coils was biting and painful, like thousands of needles pulled through one's veins. I had forgotten how using his chakra felt at the beginning. It was like liquid fire burning you up inside out, uncooperative, filled with hate and disgust. The complete opposite of what I was used to. A delightful warmth spread through my body like a blanket in the coldest of winter. The stream of his chakra was steady as his presence in me grew stronger at the same rate it diminished in Mito. Something with her seal now opened, even if just by a crack I had no trouble verifying. What concerned me was that Mito grew weaker at a dangerous rate, expending most of her strength trying to control what was ungovernable, wild, and boundless. Mito, don't hold back. I can take it. I instructed her, conserve your energy. Following my order, she loosened her grip, and the increased output augmented the strain manifold. Every nerve ending screaming for relief, I didn't move so much as a muscle and endured. After all, I had worse, a lot worse. The effects this had on Mito were clear to see. She was no longer overexerting herself. Of course, she was still growing weaker, but nowhere near fast enough for me to fear her dying prematurely. I lost all sense of time, with my own chakra sense being overwhelmed with all this chakra around and inside of me. The only thing that allowed a sense that time still moved forward was that Kurama self, the chakra he consisted of, continued moving from one place to another, and that the amounts on one end diminished and grew on the other. Besides, I noticed Mito's breath becoming more labored with every intake of air. The sweat, which only consisted of occasional drops on her forehead, in the beginning, was now present in abundance, soaking her clothes. There wasn't much left of Kurama within her. It wouldn't take much longer, I thought to myself, when suddenly the remaining chakra was unanchored and got loose, and in one fell swoop, one huge wave of chakra reached me. I wasn't given time to analyze the situation to theorize why it might have happened if Mito lost her strength and just couldn't hold on to it any longer, or if Kurama managed to free himself from her grip, or if the band his chakra was stretched into just snapped loose. Because I was hit with it, and this time, I couldn't say I had worse. A guttural cry of pain escaped my lips, and the constant pain I was under so far transformed into something else, indescribable. I feared losing my mind if this continued, and then without forewarning, it just stopped. In my mind, I felt the gates close shut behind Kurama, imprisoning him once more, and my body contorted one last time and then fell down to the ground, utterly exhausted. I could already feel how my wounds mended themselves, and my chakra adapted and realigned itself. My eyes found Mito, too weak to move. With great effort, I managed to stand up and walk over to her. I didn't need the help of a diagnostic jutsu to know that there was nothing I could do for her. Her remaining time was nearly up. I bent down and lifted her up in a princess carry. There was a promise I had to keep. I staggered my way up out of the basement and to her room, where I softly placed her on her bed. I was astounded by myself not having tripped somewhere along the way. Even though I came close once or twice, sealing Kurama in me really did a number on me. First, I removed her soaked clothes, and with some towels I found in her closet, dried and washed her body to the best of my ability before I clothed her again. She deserved so much more than not dying bathed in her sweat, but there was nothing else I could do for her. I considered more than once to wake up Kushina or to fetch Tsunade and Nawaki, but ultimately decided against it, for if it were her desire, she would have asked it of me. And I could understand her decision. Dying wasn't the worst outcome for the person leaving life behind, but for those who remain, the ones who loved her. In the hearts of those, her absence will create a void that can never be filled, never be forgotten. Time only allows for it to grow smaller. So who am I to fault her for not wanting to hurt them by allowing them to watch her slowly drift into an eternal sleep? I tried to make the passage for her as comfortable as possible and told her anecdotes from my life, and people I met to take her mind off things while holding her hand and trying my best to provide her with solace. I couldn't be sure I succeeded without Kurama's help. It would take me some time before I would regain the ability to sense emotion, and the smile she displayed and the reassuring words she uttered might have been just for my sake. I could feel the exact moment the Shinigami wrenched his greedy hands for her to drag her with him. She knew, too, because she whispered, "I'm scared," and then suddenly stilled. There was a long silence, the only sound being made by the occasional tear rolling down my cheeks splashing on her bed, my eyes focused on her, in death, peaceful-looking face. I was surprised at myself. I was convinced my body lost its ability to cry for quite some time. I already feared there wasn't anything left that could be called human within me. So it was a relief to know it wasn't the case. I just bemoaned the fact somebody had to die for me to recognize I might not have been as lost as I thought I was. It took the first sunrays illuminating her room to pull me out of my thoughts. I carefully lowered her hand I held onto till this moment to the bed and moved it to her side. I racked my fingers through her hair and tried to fix it somewhat. Pleased with the result, I leaned forward and kissed her on her forehead. I stood up and opened the curtains to allow the sun to herald the advent of a new day, unobstructed access to her room. A day that started without someone great in it. I turned around and left the room without looking back. My work had just begun. October 5th, year 36 AFOK. Mito thought of everything. In her study, I found a pre-filled mission request for Uzumaki Naruto and Kushina to transport her burnt remains to Uzushigakure to stay and attend her funeral. This would allow me, despite the Hokage's potential other plans, to be present during the time of the attack on Uzushigakure. The important thing was that she prepared to pay the S-rank extended pay, something the village couldn't allow itself to decline, for no reason. It was a lot of money, after all. The little bit extra to the normal wage we shinobi get paid for the completion of a mission was nothing more than peanuts compared to what the employer actually has to pay. She was even thoughtful enough to schedule the mission after Kushina was to receive her headband and in between the usual downtime of at least a week usually given to the genin prospects. Not sure what consequences this might have on the teams about to be formed. Should the worst case come to pass with her being overlooked, I would simply take Kushina on as my disciple. Might even be the ideal solution. What I honestly didn't expect to find was a betrothal contract for myself and Kushina, penned by none other than Mito Uzumaki. If what I was seeing here was true, she had already sent a copy of it to Uzushigakure, to Kushina's remaining family. Moreover, she made my continued appointment, my confirmation as Uzumaki clan head of the Konoha branch, conditional to accepting the betrothing. So she really wanted this to happen because losing the influence that comes with being a clan leader shortly after being named as such would hamper me in fulfilling my goals. Sure, there were other ways to get recognition and respect like prowess on the battlefield, but no matter what I ended up doing there, some people would always wonder why I lost the position. They would ask themselves, what did the Uzumaki clan see in me in order to not trust me with this, and it would hurt me. Even if I could somehow keep the position, since Uzushigakure didn't really have a say in Konoha matters, it would serve to diminish my standing. I didn't doubt Hiruzen would put such a high price tag on his help that it wouldn't be worth it, should he even be inclined to grant it in the first place. No, I didn't think I could allow that to happen. I was aware that clans practiced incest, and with my bloodline, there wouldn't be any negative effects potential kids from our union would suffer, and from an outside perspective, we were close. Nevertheless, we were nothing like lovers. It could also be argued that neither were we like mother and son, since I never came to know Kushina in that capacity. I couldn't bring myself to see her as such, she was more like a sister. I heard someone say once that arranged marriages required the husband and wife to be able to tolerate each other. This was why the ability to laugh with each other was the most essential thing, and without it, the marriage was doomed to fail. Nonetheless, it was a strange thing to do, and I wondered about her reasons. Did she see something I didn't? Was it to make sure we stayed close? I couldn't tell, but I wasn't foolish enough to disregard this for no reason. In the short time I got to know her, she didn't strike me as a person who did anything without a good reason, and she certainly wouldn't have started now. In addition to those, I found a dozen other documents, breakdowns of the branch's financial dealings, and the like. The more I read, the more I couldn't help but be impressed. As it turned out, the Uzumaki clan, to no small degree, sponsored the conception of Konoha. Even Mito's substantial dowry was used for this. Since Konoha lacked the necessary funds to repay the Uzumaki clan in their first years after being established, they were recompensated with land within the village in place of money. Mito, instead of selling the land, was able to convince her family to loan her the holdings and to give her a few years' time to come up with the money to pay the clan back. Additionally, in the event that she could manage to come up with the money, the land in question would then become the property of the Uzumaki clan of Konoha. She argued this would be an investment, an additional financial pillar outside of Uzushio that could be used in an emergency, and would allow the financial security of every one of her kin should some choose to live in Konoha. Not hurting for the money, the clan agreed and allowed Mito to take the position of clan leader of the Uzumaki clan in Konoha. A clan solely created as an additional incentive to get Uzushigakure for the loan of money and for the help with establishing Konoha. Despite it going against the originally envisioned idea for all the members of the clan having to reside within the village, the clan happily accepted the deal. It was a small price to pay in exchange for a chair at the table in Konoha. The Uzumaki clan decided to give Mito 5 years to pay them back if she succeeded the land, and everything on it would then be owed by her branch of the clan from that moment onward. She, of course, had to pay a small profit-based tax in the future to the clan, but otherwise would acquire complete autonomy. Mito, the administrator of this land, loaned money by using the land as collateral and started the construction of buildings and shops. Following this, she offered them up to civilian families for no cost, with only the condition for the Uzumaki clan to receive a cut from their profits. This way, Mito removed the need for seed money most families wouldn't have been able to come with on their own to start a business. As a result, Mito single-handedly elevated poor families to eventually become the richest in Konoha. She essentially was the one responsible for kickstarting the economy in the early days of the village. Without any real competition, the families sponsored by her were controlling the majority of the market and were able to establish an ironclad monopoly within Konoha within a few years, all backed by the Uzumaki clan, which in one way or another ended up a shareholder of most non-clan-based business in the village. Even most of the clans had some dealings with the Uzumaki clan over the years, financing their projects and lending them money, and every deal she made in some way resulted in profits for everyone involved. The cut from the profits she received in the first few years alone allowed her to clear the debt Konoha owed to Uzushio, and pay back the loans she used at the beginning. From then on, with the exception of the tax, she dutifully paid Uzushio Gakure. An incredible amount of wealth started to accumulate, making the Uzumaki clan the wealthiest clan of Konoha. A conclusion I reached only going over her dealing with other people and didn't include the money she made through her own labor. She designed and applied seals throughout the whole village, the detection barrier, the seals carved on the village walls preventing people from sticking to its surface using chakra on their feet, and hundreds of other seals all commissioned from her. All her work was worth an incredible amount of money. On top of that, she was paid a retainer to repair and maintain those seals. Especially the detection barrier surrounding the village and its outskirts, which was used as an early warning system that had no small part in keeping the village safe and was something the higher-ups were ready to pay a nice sum for. Which made a lot of sense, having to rely on just one clan for something like this, with the Hyuga having the predisposition for that might hurt the village, in the long run, should they decide to leverage their importance. Therefore it was no surprise that they were willing to pay a premium for that, notably, since the seal was operated by the barrier squad under the direct control of the Hokage instead of the Uzumaki clan, therefore allowing for no abuse of trust. Looking over those contracts, I once more had to congratulate her for her genius. Simply because the arrangements for those seals were all issued to the Uzumaki clan and not exclusively to herself. Meaning the Hokage, even if he wanted to, couldn't just cancel them and deny me a good revenue without good reason, which not liking me didn't qualify as. What I also found lying on her desk was a scroll labeled ventriloquism, obviously intended as a reminder to get me to learn it. I couldn't trust all the Hyuga as I could back in my own time, thereby a means of communication that they couldn't eavesdrop upon. One that would even allow me to fool them if your lips are spelling out different things, might be a useful skill to have. Especially with a guy like Danzo still around. I couldn't be sure that he had no Hyuga in his employ. Considering the prowess of their eyes and the fact that no one commented on what he had under his bandages after the Uchiha massacre lent credence to it. It was likely that he either blackmailed the clan or found a way to control them via other means, because I refused to believe that Hayashi would willfully work together with him. With someone who harvested the eyes of another dojutsu-bearing clan. Could it have been Kodo Amatsukami responsible? No, he shouldn't have had an eye capable of it at this time, with Shursui about to be born in a few years. Even if there was another user of this technique that he could have gotten his hands on, it wouldn't have worked. Not the way he would have needed it to. Ao, after all, was able to identify the jutsu being used on Mifune with his stolen Byakugan, therefore exerting control over the Hyuga this way would have required to get at least all the main branch members under his control. With Kodo Amatsukami being a single target genjutsu a near impossible endeavor, with the inherent shinobi paranoia, he wouldn't have been able to get them all one at a time. Something would have inevitably gone wrong and exposed him. Chiefly since he needed Senju DNA to get the jutsu to work within reasonable time intervals. So it must have been through different means, which didn't bode well for me because he could already be in control of the Hyuga. I couldn't allow myself to put my trust in someone unworthy of it. It would be a mistake I simply couldn't afford. Therefore I had to wait in approaching the Hyuga and Uchiha clan with my seals until my emotion sensing returned. Shouldn't be long before that happened. The stinging and pain in my body was already receding, and my perfect chakra control was slowly returning. Which also meant it wouldn't be long till I could meet the grumpy old fox. When I sensed Kushina awaken, I stopped my work. There wasn't much left to look over either way. I made my way upstairs and waited in front of her room for her to emerge. That occurred in a rather explosive manner. One moment, she was stretching on her bed like a cat after waking from a nap to overexcited beehive, and stormed out of her room, nearly knocking me over in the process. If not for me catching her under the arms. Naruto Oniai-chan, what are you doing here? Doesn't matter, I'm late. I overslept. Why didn't Mito-oba-san wake me? Where is she? I can't sense her. The words bubbled from the bed-headed girl, while she half-heartedly tried to wrest herself free of me. I went down on my knees to reach her eye level. Kushina, slow down and listen to me. I couldn't be sure what it was, my soft tone or the fact that I didn't release my grip on her, but she realized something was wrong and ceased with her struggling. It's Mito, I said, heavy with meaning. She is dead. She died during the night. Stop, Oniai-chan. You don't joke about something like that, she admonished, with an uneasy smile. I'm so sorry, Kushihime. No, 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 she can't be dead. She is Uzumaki. We live forever. She can't just leave me alone. She started to get hysteric. I embraced her in order to get her to calm down and caressed her beautiful red hair. Sure, I'm still here, and I won't leave you. I promise, I whispered soothingly in Kushina's ear as she clung to me as if there was no tomorrow and cried into my shoulder. Through her wails, she somehow managed to press out a few words. Really? You aren't tricking me? You promised to stay with me for the rest of my life? Yes, I do, Kushihime, and Uzumaki Naruto never goes back on his words. I will stay with you forever. After I said those words, Kushina squeezed me even tighter, and I got the feeling she did not intend to let me go ever again. I had to admit to myself that I had no problem with that. It felt really nice, being held by her in her warm embrace, smelling her strawberry scent. There were worse fates, which could await someone like me. This was different. This was heaven, which was a strange feeling. I came here knowing that I could change things for the better to save all of my friends and family for those yet to be born, but deep down, I had no expectations for what that would mean for me. It was just another mission in my mind, one I couldn't fail but a mission nonetheless, one, to be honest, I didn't see myself surviving, let alone returning from. Once more, I was intent on shouldering all the problems, the weight of the world by myself, but being held by Kushina for the first time in a long while, I could feel the inkling of something within me from which thought I lost some time ago: hope. Despite having managed to come here, the driving force behind it wasn't some vague prospect of a better future but pure unadulterated desperation. Which made it strange that now there was a flicker of it within me, lit by her unwillingness to part with me. She gave me a reason to come back home. Realizing that, I started to cry myself and buried myself deeper in her embrace, like two people drowning, trying to hold on to driftwood, unwilling to let go of it. Was this the reason Mito wanted me to marry her, knowing what we could be for each other? A safe harbor, loving family? I didn't know, and for the moment, I didn't really care while enjoying the warmth of Kushina. We held each other for a long time until there were no more tears to be shed. She then slowly freed herself from my grasp. Can I see her? To say my farewells? She finally asked with red begging eyes. Of course, I offered her my hand, and she reached for it. Together, we then walked, holding hands, to Mito's room. She was still lying there the exact same way I left her, clad in her white kimono, eyes closed, and her hands folded on her stomach. Her loose hair was strewn over her pillow. If not for the lack of heartbeat seeing her this way, one could think she was meditating. We both, with our hands still interlinked, stepped right next to her. Kushina, with her free hand, caressed Mito's hair and gave her a farewell kiss on the forehead. She is so cold to my touch, she said with a trembling voice. That is what death is all about, I said, the warmth leaving one's body, leaving just an empty shell behind. I gave her time to contemplate my words and then prompted her. Come on, let's go. After we left the room, she asked, Oniai-chan, can I stay? Yes, of course, I wouldn't dream of sending you to the academy when. She nodded, signaling her understanding and sparing me from having to say it. What now? She wondered. Well, you should eat something. The day ahead might be a long one. I'm not hungry, she said. I doubted the truthfulness of her statement. Nevertheless, I refrained from calling her out on it. I also had no mind to eat something, although I did know better. Okay, I relented. In that case, I think it is time to inform Tsunade and Iwaki. Do we have to? She asked. I know you don't like them, Tsunade in particular, but they too loved Mito. It wouldn't be fair to deny them the same courtesy we would expect if the roles were reversed, and she would have lived with them. She reluctantly nodded, hearing my explanation. Do you want to stay here? I can fetch them by myself, I offered. Her grip on my hand strengthened. Don't leave me alone, she begged. I won't, I promised, remember. She looked relieved at hearing me say it. We should change in something appropriate for the situation, I said. Okay, was her curt response. We both went our separate ways to our rooms, and I unsealed a black kimono, a piece of clothing that I had worn far too often in recent history. Clad in this reminiscent outfit, I returned to the door of Kushina's room and waited for her to come out. When she eventually did, what I hadn't expected was for her to reach for my hands and drag me inside. She led me to a chair in front of a huge mirror and pressed a comb into my hands. Mito-chan used to comb my hair every morning after waking me, Would you? She couldn't bring herself to say more before she was overwhelmed by her feelings and started sobbing. It would be my pleasure, Haim, I declared with a mock bow. I also used to place a peck on her head. I softly guided her to sit on the chair, and then moved behind her to take care of her hair. It took quite some to untangle it and get it to hang straight down from her head. Something that seemed to amuse Kushina to no end, given the grin she wore throughout the whole time. I tried to puzzle out how to get her hair to behave. Eventually, I succeeded in my task. Good, all done, I proudly proclaimed at my work. You suck, Oni-chan, that took forever. A clear indication you lack training, which is why in my endless generosity I will allow you to comb my hair every day from this day forward, she unceremoniously declared. I ran right into it, didn't I? As my Haim commands, I consented demurely. She stood up in her form-fitting black kimono, which accentuated her curves and budding breasts far more than her usual outfit did, more than likely ascribed to her foregoing her breast binding usually used under mesh shirts. She interlinked her hand with mine, and we left the Uzumaki compound in the direction of the Senju compound. It was a short distance we had to travel since they were located right next to each other. Nonetheless, it felt different, which was mostly owed to the different architecture and our compound only hosting a single large structure in the middle of what looked and felt like a nature cradle. The Senju compound was the opposite of that. It looked like an urban environment, full of different-sized houses in various stages of decay, each one being surrounded by some plants, with trees being the most prominent. The few people up and about we came across were mainly parents on their way to bring their children to school. They ignored us for the most part. A nod was the extent of interaction we had with any of them. An allegory of the slow downfall of the once great Senju clan. I knew from my history lessons that after the death of Tobirama, the Senju clan was in a steady decline, and that the Second Shinobi World War, with the high casualty rate especially for the Senju clan, was ultimately responsible for Tsunade to become the last of her clan. However, seeing it, with my own eyes, that only every second or third house looked inhabited really drove the point home far more than any dry book knowledge ever could. Not for the first time, I wondered how that came to be. After all, the Senju and Uchiha fought for decades against each other. Fights that, of course, resulted in many deaths on both sides as a consequence. But despite that, both clans thrived during that time. For some reason, after settling down, the Senju clan declined. It couldn't be explained by the establishment of the Uchiha police force alone. While it was true that it kept most Uchiha within the village during peace times, it wasn't the same in a war, when the village had to deploy them too, which should have equalized their numbers but for some reason didn't. Well, I had to take a look at the birthing register to know for sure, but somehow I doubted the Uchiha were more fertile. In fact, it should be the other way around. In other words, there had to be another reason for their decline. Since it set in only after Tobirama's death, it could be that they were sent on more dangerous missions on average. Or were they? Of course, how did I not see that earlier? There were 3 clans in the history of the elemental nation who possessed the ability to subdue and control the Bijou. And all 3, except for a few sole survivors, were wiped out by the time I reached my teens. All things considered, if Madara had his hands in the demise of the Uzumaki and the Uchiha, what made me think he couldn't have had a hand in the Senjus too? It would make a lot of sense. The Uchiha tasked with enforcing the law and protecting the village were kept mostly in its confines, and the Uzumaki with their impregnable island would require more effort to get to than slowly killing the Senjus who would leave the village constantly. And since they were paired with other shinobi, it might not even look like someone was picking them off even by looking closely at those occurrences. Without my knowledge of the future, I wouldn't have considered it either, and I stopped believing in coincidences some time ago. Experience taught me that when something looked like it was purposely done, it usually is, despite not knowing the who and why. I had to wonder if this was even necessary. There wasn't a Senju since Hashirama capable of wielding the Mokuton. Admittedly, he couldn't risk it. If another Senju were to emerge with the same strength as the first, Madara could kiss his plans goodbye. Kushina guided us to the biggest house right in the center of the compound. Not that it would have been necessary with my sensor ability, finding her would have been child's play. Being lead had the advantage that no one would question how I found her house and might put 2 and 2 together. Kagura Shingon is one if not the strongest sensor jutsu in existence, and I would rather avoid it becoming common knowledge that I possessed such an ability. The house was one of the few in good repair. Even the small garden surrounded by a hedge seemed to be cared for, with several different herbs growing all around. We walked up to a small bell connected to a rope right next to the door and pulled on it. The chime spread throughout the area and resonated for some time. The few people within hearing range gave us a short glance and then continued with what they were doing. The door was opened by a kid a hand's breadth taller than Kushina. He had short light brown disheveled spiky hair, not unlike my own, and wore a dark teal poncho. The necklace of which a future copy was sealed within one of my scrolls was hanging around his neck. It made it clear to me that this could only be Nawaki. A closer look confirmed my suspicions. There were some undeniable similarities between us, not just limited to our looks. His demeanor was closely mirrored by my own of the same age. As a result, having different hair and